the Clean Energy Standard Tech Conference on Energy Storage. I would like to first hand it over to Scott to give a brief introduction and talk about the CES.
Thank you. I'm going to assume that looking around this room that people know about the CES. So I'm going to skip that part and free up time, but I do have a couple things I want to say. First, I want to thank everybody for coming out today. We all recognize that the department is putting out a lot of proposals, a lot of white papers. There are comment periods overlapping with comment periods. The CES, of course, is a big focus for all of us. So we appreciate you taking the time to participate today in what we think is a very important set of questions and an important component for the CES and for REV in general. Let's start with a couple introductions of the folks who are here. I'll let them introduce themselves, and I'll start at my far left. That's you.
Good morning. I'm Tammy Mitchell. I'm Chief of Electric Distribution for DPS staff.
Good morning. My name is Raj Adapalli. I'm the Managing Director of Utility Rates and Service with the department staff.
And good morning. I'm Jason Doling with NYSERDA, and I help lead our energy storage deployment activities.
And
my name is Matt Wallace. I'm an engineer with the Department of Public Service.
And I want to start by thanking Matt and Jason for pulling today together and coordinating all the work that goes into preparing and executing for a day like today. I also want to extend the greetings and regrets from our chair, Audrey Zibelman, who could not make it today. Those of you who have been following the CES proceeding in general and this topic in particular know her keen interest in it. Today we want to explore the role of storage as it impacts the distribution system. Needless to say, there's a lot going on, led by discussions by NISO and in other forum looking at the bulk system. Today we want to try to turn our sights into the distribution system. So both the presentations will be focusing in that area. I understand that there isn't always a bright line, but we're really looking in that area and ask that as people frame their questions, that you keep that context in mind. And we do this so we can delve into issues involving storage and how storage can help us obtain the objectives of REV in general, and also attaining the goals of the CES in particular, the Clean Energy Standard. And to that end, I look forward today to having a discussion where we can understand the role, talk about the value, but most importantly, identify barriers that might be preventing the achievement of that value, the acquisition of that value, and address strategies and actions that can overcome those barriers. And with specific regard to the CES, which will be the focus of the afternoon discussions, we want to explore what role storage can play as a component of the CES itself, meeting the 50 by 30 goal, achieving our carbon goals. But very importantly, how do we determine that value, and how do we compensate for that value that storage might provide? And what's a reasonable time frame? Everything doesn't have to happen on day one, but maybe it can. In its simplest terms, there are folks who will say that storage should have a tier in the CES. Other people will respond to that by saying, oh, I'm not sure how that works. Some people say that storage should be able to generate RECs on their own. That raises all sorts of interesting complications. What we want to do today is get some of those issues out on the table, explore the feasibility of some of these, but most of all, understand what actions the Commission could be taking to help accelerate the integration of storage as part of our energy framework. Before we start with the program, I just want to ask Raj if you'd like to add anything.
Scott, you covered it all. Thank you.
And lastly, a couple of logistics items. When it comes time for questions, if anybody would like to ask a question, please use the podium. That will ensure both that people will be able to hear you with the microphone, but also that you will be picked up on the webcast for those people who are watching on the webcast. And also, the agenda points out that there will be a lunch break, and Matt's going to do everything he can to keep us on schedule. Matt, it's all yours.
All right. So next up, I would like to introduce Rick Fioravanti, our energy storage expert, to give us a, I say our, he doesn't work for the department. He's a consultant.
Someone's
Right, exactly. And he's going to provide us with a level-setting presentation on the state of the storage industry today.
Great, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. Again, I'll use the term we, but we were discussing about, before this session started, it would be good to take a look at what other states have done, what is going on in other places, and whether there are lessons that can be gathered from that. And I know, gosh, nobody wants to start the day off with lessons, but I think when you look at the activities that we've seen, there are things that we can draw from them and guidelines and signposts that we may want to take a look at to see how they would apply to what New York is doing. So for today, very brief, very simple. I just really want to go over how storage has been advancing in other key states. Again, are there recommendations that we can get from what those activities are? And then also just do a brief level setting on what is the current state of storage technologies. It's changing rapidly. We still, no matter how hard we try, there seems to be a knowledge gap with the understanding of the technologies and how do they apply to applications. So I wanted to briefly talk about that. Should I make that announcement about cell phones as well?
Please mute your phones.
So just to talk about, first, one of the most obvious state to look at is California and what has been happening there. And everybody looks at that and they think about AB 2514 and the 1.225 gigawatts. But a lot of the efforts that happened there started even before that. And much like New York, California began to push very aggressive renewable goals for the state. Initially, they were looking at 33% in 2020, but they were talking about this in the 2008-2010 period. The ISO in the California Energy Commission, I use a lot of acronyms, so forgive me for that, examined the impact of what this penetration would be. In fact, there was a study that was conducted by KEMA that looked at the impact of wind, solar, and whether storage could be a tool to mitigate what we were seeing and what we could see with that type of penetration level. And what the study showed was that for the potential impacts that we were seeing, that there was approximately a 3 to 5 gigawatt need of storage to help mitigate some of the potential issues that we could get from that type of penetration. So there were actually two things that were really gleaned from that effort. The first one was the fact that storage could mitigate the issues, that putting in large penetration of variable renewable devices would have an impact on how you operate and maintain the grid. But what the key factor was also that they started looking at the timeline, 33% by 2020, and working backwards, and what they would have to do to, starting in 2010, to get that 3 to 5 gigawatts deployed onto the system. And that was rather daunting. And when you started looking at, the trends that they were seeing in the latter part of that decade to where they wanted to go by 2020, they realized that they needed to take steps. And this no regrets term was actually starting to get floated around that time. Right after that, it was really AB 2514, and by no means do I want to take anything away from the effort that Janice Lynn put to having AB 2514 come into fruition. But again, a lot of the impulse behind and the motivation behind making that work was really this desire or this understanding that they had to get storage deployed if they wanted to get the renewable penetration that they were hoping to see. So AB 2514 was launched. It was an analysis that was very forward-looking. It examined the benefits of storage costs and the effectiveness of storage, but it looked at storage on transmission, on wholesale, and customer-side applications. The impact of that is what we see. The chart that many of us are familiar with was how they were going to go about deploying the 1.325 gigawatts over a 7-year period, culminating in 2020. The mandate that they were actually focusing on, it encouraged the use of storage at all levels, not just on the customer side, but distribution with utilities and transmission. It targeted deployments, again, over the 7-year period. And it really started ushering in concepts of utility ownership, which at that point had not been looked at, but also how the technologies on the customer side of the meter could also be used to help with grid operations. And despite the ruling having off-ramps, there was some skepticism about the numbers. Today, we actually are outpacing these goals. And so the success has been shown in how the storage has been deployed and the speed at which it is getting deployed. Another thing that California did, which is I think was mentioned earlier, there was a roadmap to look at the barriers. One of the issues that came out is that if they were going to push the technologies to try to get them deployed, they wanted to make sure that there were no regulatory, tariff, or policy barriers that would prevent it from happening. So the California Public Utility Commission, the Energy Commission, and the ISO got together and conducted a very stakeholder-inclusive task of looking at all the barriers that may be out there that could potentially prevent storage from being deployed at the speed which is going to be needed. And so that was actually something that was much less advertised, but very key in the efforts that were going on with storage in California. And again, some unique approaches came out of and are still coming out about how storage is getting adopted. The process is allowing utilities to look at, not only their ownership structures, but also working with customer-side applications, bringing things together like renting storage and utilizing it from applications that have been deployed on the customer side of the meter, and pioneering some unique relationships and some unique structures of how to do that. The other state that also gets talked about, where we're going down, is Hawaii. And again, Hawaii is had some very unique opportunities because A, it was an isolated grid, and B, they were seeing a tremendous amount of renewable penetration. The early aspects of it were the impacts of large-scale generation, large-scale variable renewable generation that was being deployed. And in fact, much like California, the state of Hawaii did take the first steps of doing the analysis, looking at what would be the impacts of high penetration levels of variable renewable devices on their grid, and what would be needed to mitigate that. From that, they actually started putting interconnection policies down, forcing the developers or asking the developers to make sure that storage accompanied most of the projects that were being deployed that was needed to get the interconnection. What else has been happening within that state is the amount of solar that has been getting deployed as well, and solar being deployed on the customer side. Even though the state is looking and driving to 100% renewables, they're already seeing penetration rates of about 50%. So again, it's a great petri dish of what we're trying to look at and justifying some of the tools and models that have been looked at it. But also, when you start looking at what's happening on the customer side of the meter, they are already seeing penetration rates of about 15 to 20% of residential storage. And what this is driving them to do is to look at how they can utilize that asset as a tool, combining it with storage, entering into programs with the DOE to look at holistically how storage and solar can be combined, how it can be utilized to better operate the grid, and further examine the potential that the coupled applications could have. Now, a lot of it was also because of their net metering tariff was being ebbed as well. New developers of solar systems were not going to be allowed to take advantage of that program. So again, something that incentivized people to use storage in its place, but once those devices were coupled together, it came to the point of how to use them, how to utilize them. So Hawaii is interesting in the respect that not only did it look at the impact of how storage is needed to help them reach their potential of the overall penetration, but when they started looking at what was happening on the customer side of the meter as well, storage was allowing them to take advantage of the activities that were happening there, of the penetration of solar on their system, and then how storage could be utilized to help make that more of an asset as opposed to a burden. So just breaking away from that and talking a little bit about the current state of the technologies and what we're seeing in the industry today. Storage, it's no great statement to say it's advancing, improving itself in multiple applications. And for some specific applications, it's actually nearing price parity with traditional solutions. Cost reductions are occurring at a rate faster than what most folks were anticipating. There are still advancements going on in technologies, continuing even as technologies are commercializing. However, I think I would use the term that we're on the precipice. I'm not sure I would be there to say that we're at a point of mass deployment, but we are just nearing the precipice to get to that point. It may be a more appropriate way to describe where storage is. It's been stated before, and it's still appropriate today, that storage simply isn't one technology, nor is it advanced technology. We often, when we start looking at it, we get caught in a lithium whirlwind, as they say, that most people will associate storage with that one technology just because it's being seen in many areas. But when we start looking at the deployments and mapping the applications, the requirements of the applications to the needs of to the characteristics of what we see in storage technologies, it becomes pretty clear that it's not just one technology. It's both energy and power. It's long duration. It's different methods and methodologies to look at it. So it's when we examine and see that we're going to have to see more than one technology. It's not just lithium advancing rapidly in the cost reductions, but it doesn't mean that because one technology is going down that path that it's going to be the best technology for every application. So that is something that is still being seen today, and in some ways causing what I'd call a knowledge gap in some of the conclusions that we're seeing around storage. And again, when we look at the multiple application requirements, this mix of traditional, advanced, power, and energy, we can see how storage is creating a knowledge gap on storage. The cost components, where all these technologies are, the cost reductions, the trend lines that we're seeing, they vary across technologies. But as we get more and more individuals into this area and looking into developing and looking to adopt it, it's now, I think, more important than ever to cover this knowledge gap and make sure that everybody that is talking about this subject is on the same page and working with the same numbers. One of the things that we did just quickly want to talk about is differentiating these and looking at the different technologies and what they do and how they're utilized. So electrical mechanical, the categories that we were talking about, between electrical mechanical, pumped hydro, thermal, and mechanical, I just did want to give a brief description of it. So when you talk about electrical mechanical, it's really power and energy. For power, it's lithium. Its fast response capabilities make it ideal for renewable integration. However, its rapid price decline is actually allowing it to be stretched into other applications, more into the energy side. On the energy systems, we're seeing new entrants, folks like UET, EOS, less commercialized, but the technologies actually may be more appropriate for some of the longer duration distributed applications that are looking to happen on the customer side or even on the utility side of the meter. Will they match the price declines that we're seeing in lithium? Are they going to be able to be competitive with it? It's still a great question. As I said, these technologies are a little bit behind what we've seen on the lithium side, but they are opportunities and they are rapidly being developed. When we look at pumped hydro, it's still by far the largest deployed storage technology, but there are questions about the speed and its ability to be utilized for some of the renewable integration systems that we're looking at. One of the questions that really is hard to get an answer to is when you start looking at how storage can mitigate some of the potential issues we see out of variable generation. The question is, how fast does it have to be? We get an idea of how many megawatts or gigawatts are going to be required, but the next question is, how fast does that technology have to be? Does it have to be all of one technology? Does it have to be all one speed? Or can it be a mixture of fast, medium devices that come in to mitigate some of the issues? These are questions that really need to be investigated because the options are out there, and all the technologies have the potential of contributing to some of the solutions that we're looking at. The thermal side often always gets talked about. I've actually, and many times when I talk about storage, I tend to focus on the advanced systems, and every time I do that, I get people from the thermal side saying, no, we're part of this as well. I do consider thermal storage more of a load-shifting technology rather than just pure storage. But we are seeing with the communications and the controls capabilities today that these devices can be utilized to work with and help integrate renewable technologies as well. So even though we look at it as a storage technology, it doesn't yet really fit the exact definition of storage because, again, it doesn't push electrons back onto the grid, but it can be utilized today in a lot of aspects. So quickly, just to wrap this up, some of the recommendations, I think the real key is the common theme that we've seen in all of these examples that we've shown is the analysis to determine what the actual needs are for storage, to help the planners understand what may be necessary to attain these renewable goals that New York has. So now that we look at the penetration that's being contemplated, we're moving beyond targets and looking for actual goals. This is probably more important than ever to have this understanding, to gauge what the penetration is going to be for the state of New York, what the impact of that is going to be on the grid, and then how you can mitigate that. There's an extra piece to that as well, as we've seen solar and storage and combinations advance as well, and we've seen developers look to deploy on that side of the meter. There also needs to be a deep understanding of what is happening at the edge of the grid. I think of it as a triangle. When we start talking about the goals of the renewables that we want, the amount of storage that probably is going to be required to help integrate that, and then we look at what's happening on the customer side of the meter and get an understanding of what is actually happening on the customer side of the meter, then we'll get a good understanding of what we need to fill the gap. And is that going to be with utilities? Is that going to be with developers? Those answers right now are still a little unclear, and it's essential for this next step to go forward that analysis happens. And again, it's the common theme that we've seen in all the activities that have been happening prior to New York. The final recommendation, find ways and more ways to close the knowledge gap. And frankly, the studies that typically take place that we were mentioning in other states is a great vehicle for that. When you start looking at these efforts, they tend to be stakeholder engagement, stakeholder efforts. It brings the whole community together because people develop a consensus on the cost, the trajectories, the applications, and how the applications are used. So they kind of go hand in hand. When you look at first the need for the studies and then realize that there's still a knowledge gap out there, that conducting these studies in a way that has been done goes a long way to closing that gap and helping get everybody on the same page as to what technologies are, where they're going, and how they can be best utilized. So that's all. I mean, I hope I didn't get any flashing lights, but again, trying to set the stage. As far as the, I'll make a larger font. The presentation slides will be available as well. But forgive that if you are having trouble seeing them, but there's a lot of information. So are there any questions or any thoughts or contributions as we look to, again, we were just really looking to try to set the stage here, offer some recommendations as to what we may go, but I know the panels are going to be discussing more specifics of what can be done, but also just wanted to let folks know what has been done and how some of that can be leveraged or should be leveraged to what some of the next steps in New York may be.
Quick follow-up question on the California. Besides setting goals or targets to get X gigawatts of storage, are there any specific pricing mechanisms that they put in place to compensate them or provide revenue certainty to the installers?
Well, I think one of the major efforts was the utility ownership factor that was brought into there. I mean, half of that 1.325 gigawatts was going to be utility owned, in a major step, to help advance that. I think also, if you look at the SCHIP program that was there, as that SCHIP program started evolving in California, you started seeing storage play a more and more prominent role. First, it was being part of their incentive program, if it was coupled with solar. Then, right after that, soon after that, they started saying no, standalone would be fine as well, because it was identified as a technology that the state wanted to keep in as its options of available tools to utilize. So the SCHIP program is still very prominent in the state and very active for folks looking to deploy, particularly solar storage combinations, but also utility involvement in the effort as well. I think was big drivers to it. Sure.
The podium, please.
Hi, Jinjin from Canadison. So in your closing slide, you say there's an information gap, right? So when we talk about energy storage, there's a huge space from customers to integrators to regulators. Where do you see that knowledge gap is most or the biggest? And where do we start in terms of filling that gap? And how do you see that gap being closed?
Well, I think the stakeholder involved efforts is key. The more people get involved in this, there's always a saying that the knowledge versus the participation, that in early days when you had fewer participants, the knowledge was greater. As you move and get more and more folks involved, that knowledge gap starts increasing. I really do believe stakeholder efforts, stakeholder processes are key, particularly in this area because the technology is moving quickly. It's not being just that it's advancing quickly. The evolution of the pricing trends, the combinations of how it's being utilized, the introduction of new technologies, the utilization of traditional lead-acid technologies, how they're being packaged, is being moved at a very rapid pace. And it's really just basically folks have a hard time keeping up with it. People in the industry have a hard time keeping up with it, let alone people that are coming in from the outside. So I think more reliance on some of the studies and the stakeholder efforts. Of course, in New York, we have New York Best. They have recently put out a roadmap to talk about storage, making that a go-to place for people that are looking to understand the technology. I think is key. But it's a challenge, and it's always going to be a challenge because storage isn't a static technology, and it isn't a single technology. It's multiple technologies, multiple applications, and it's still really in a state of rapid advancement. And it's going to always create a challenge on making sure everybody is understanding exactly where we are as of May 2016. Bill?
Hi, Rick. Bill Acker with New York Best. To follow up on Roger's question, one of the things a lot of our members have pressed upon has been the confidence in future revenue streams and the business model that can be put together for storage projects. And I'd like you to maybe comment on in California how that's being done and how you're seeing the contractual mechanisms or other mechanisms that are being put in place that allows for enough revenue confidence to move the market forward.
Well, I mean, there's it's a great question. I'm not sure they have all the answers for that at this point. There are things that are being that are mechanisms that are being tried, and one of them I reference SoCal Edison's "Bring Us Your Megawatts," where they are looking to utilize the deployments that are happening at commercial facilities, at customer-sided facilities. So the recognition that developers are able to deploy storage on the customer side for their reasons, but then accessing that and paying for that access as a means or an alternative way of developing on their own. You're also seeing other mechanisms of just straight utility ownership, and they're looking at various models for that, whether it's a build, own, lease, build, own, transfer, or something that they're trying to construct on their own. I think each of the utilities out there are, they certainly can speak for themselves, but are looking at different mechanisms, and they're not all following the same path. But I think what they are trying to do is be creative in how they're looking at utilizing the adoption that's going on, and then also taking advantage of the encouragement they're getting to develop it on their own.
Thank you.
I don't think I really answered the question because but it's still something that's moving today.
So let me cut off questions for right now for the sake of time. I'm so sorry. We are going to have a Q&A, extended Q&A in a little bit though. If I could ask the first panel to come on up. And
You're welcome to join me up here, back there, wherever you want to sit. There's name tags, but you don't actually have to sit where they are, so sit wherever you want. Move them around. If you could just pop them up for the camera. Thank you. All right, so this panel is going to focus on operations under high penetrations of renewables. We have Bill Acker, the Executive Director of New York Best, Mike DeSocio from New York ISO. I'm sorry if I mispronounced. Sharon Hillman from AES Energy Storage. Joining us over the phone and over the WebEx here is Rick Cutright from GE, and lastly is Dan Vickery from Green Charge Networks. So we'll let Bill kick off the panel.
Very good. Can you bring the slide?
Yes.
Good. So Matt and is the mic on? Can you hear me all right? The Matt and staff had asked me to talk about the energy storage roadmap for the New York electricity grid that New York Best led the efforts of putting together, that was released in January. And so I'm just going to click forward here.
Yeah, you can roll the mouse or however you want to do it.
That's good. So this effort involved nearly 100 stakeholders to work on developing an understanding of the applications for energy storage on the electricity grid, and a discussion of some of the challenges and pathways and actions to bring energy storage forward on the New York State electricity grid. In that work, there are really three key areas that we view energy storage as being very impactful and a critical enabling technology to help with the REV objectives. And the first is supporting the improvement of the efficiency and capacity factor. This gets to the peak load and to other aspects of what energy storage can do on the grid. The second is increasing the amount of renewables, which Rick has already talked a bit about here today. Clearly, there's a lot of levels of how energy storage engages to do that we'll talk a little bit about as we go forward. And the third is resiliency and reliability on the grid. So in the roadmap, we spent some time in looking at these various different aspects and how energy storage can perform these functions, and came out with sets of recommendations around that. Now, in thinking about this, it's important to recognize that as we're making this transition, the whole principle of REV, which I think is a very, very forward-looking and very, very important initiative, is that we're going to see a dramatic transformation of both how the grid functions and also what assets can be brought to bear to make it function, and which will enable new business models as we do that. And so as we look at this transition from a top-down grid to a more networked grid, transactional grid, we recognize that there are a whole host of different services and functions that energy storage can provide. And I should step back right now and say this is actually one of the key challenges that energy storage has had. It's kind of the curse of the plentiful, right? Every time you hear a talk about energy storage, you hear two things. One, there are a million technologies, and two, there are a million applications. And when you start there, you don't get any meat to the argument, right? You don't get to the points where you can actually tangibly make progress forward. And the other thing that we struggle as we do these things is that in many cases, in almost all cases, energy storage will be performing multiple applications simultaneously, they're providing multiple benefits even whether you intend to or not. So part of what the roadmap looked at is how these things do work together. And in looking at this, we characterized many different applications on the grid, and we characterized them by the three large areas that I just spoke about. So the whole capacity peak load reduction, the renewables integration, and the resiliency and reliability, and then where energy storage is sited, customer meter, behind the meter, on the distribution system, on the generation and transmission grid. And when you look at that, there are lots and lots of different applications and lots of different ways these do interact as we move forward together. Now, in an effort to avoid the confusion of saying there are a million applications, I want to focus on two areas here and then talk a little bit about how they pull together. So the first of those areas is the flattening of the peak on the electric grid. And as PSE staff, and I think most people in the room are well aware, there is a large opportunity in New York State with respect to flattening the peak and having derivative savings. The PSC has estimated that to be $1.2 to $1.7 billion a year for the flattening the top 100 hours. Energy storage, we're going to talk about goals in a minute. We laid out a few goals. The near-term goal of 1 gigawatt, 2 gigawatt hours would eliminate 30 of the 100 hours. 2 gigawatt, 10 gigawatt hours would flatten over a third of the energy. Importantly, as you look at the flattening of the grid and these services, all of that can be performed in a very short time period. So unlike a peaker plant that's only running those time periods, the energy storage is doing that flattening, and then it's available for use for all of the different applications. So when you're doing this flattening of the portion of the 100 hours, you're talking about only 6 days a year doing that on the 2013 data that this analysis was done for, which allows you to spend a lot of time doing many, many other pieces. Now, another question that was addressed in this lead up to this point was what areas could be done, what business models, other things can be done to further reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, I think we all recognize that the peaker plants that are now serving this generally are single cycle, generally are high emitting, both on a CO2 and on an NOx and other criteria pollutants that go with that. The shifting of that load from the peaker plants to the combined cycle have great emissions benefits, and there are also a whole bunch of other somewhat hidden benefits. Moving the power at night, you get less line losses. There are a whole host increasing the load on the gas turbines, the combined cycle gas turbines increases their efficiency, whole host of other pieces that go into that. So we have a lot of advantages of taking these steps with energy storage. Now, as I just said, these same devices can be doing other things. And a very, very important other thing is the renewable integration that we're talking about here today. So we have a goal that we've talked about here of 50% renewable energy by 2030. And I think it's important to recognize that is a stepping stone toward an 80% reduction of greenhouse gases in 2050. So the pathway to that goal is very, very important because it's a pathway that needs to be able to continue. We need to be on a path that can continue to grow past 2030. And how you do that, whether you take an approach where we use the old business model, which is renewables are kind of an extra on the grid, and we're going to have basically a redundant grid, fossil fuel backup for everything, or we're going to truly integrate the renewables into the grid, not have fossil fuel backup for everything, is very, very important. And then the true integration of renewables to the grid, that choice then gets to having to shift both load and energy in some ways. I would argue that you cannot just shift load. Obviously, we need to be able to have energy available when people need it, and there's a point that's needed to shift energy, and later Rick Cutright will do some estimates around that. We made some estimates in the roadmap associated with this. So with renewable integration, obviously, because of the low capacity factors of a lot of the renewables, that goal of 50% is a very large amount of additional wind and solar, as we all know. Firming and smoothing is going to be important. Energy shifting is going to be important. In the roadmap, we estimated that we need at least 4 gigawatts of multi-hour storage. And as Rick just talked about, Rick was actually on the board of New York BESS at the time the roadmap was written, we recommend that we do a further detailed study to further quantify that. But we do believe that there's enough knowledge, especially now as time's progressed since January, to set some no regrets levels here that we should be getting to. So in the roadmap, we talked about some of the challenges. There are a couple I want to address here a little bit today. One of the first challenges associated with energy storage on the electricity grid of New York is the inability to monetize the full value of storage currently, both in participating in existing markets, where you can participate under certain circumstances, but many times not multiple ones at the same time. And also, there are other values that aren't monetized today at all. Second point, confidence in the future revenue stream. This is absolutely vital. In order to put in large CapEx projects, we have to have models associated with the regulations right now that allow project developers and financiers to have confidence in future revenue streams or front-load revenue streams. And even though that we will be having interim approaches, we need to make sure those interim approaches, just as the solar ones that recently put forward, have that establishment of either a future revenue stream or front-loading. High soft costs and insufficient availability of information. I'll be moving pretty quickly through a couple of things. The point's been made that batteries have been coming down in price very, very rapidly. This is lithium-ion packs versus solar cells. We've had a 4x decline in lithium-ion pack price over the last 5 years. Very, very quick reduction in price. The roadmap lays out a number of goals: 2 gigawatts by 2025 of multi-hour storage, 4 gigawatts by 2030 to support the renewable goals. And my last slide, I just want to end on a couple of recommendations. New York BESS has filed many, many recommendations throughout the REV process and participates a great deal in the REV process. Within the need for near-term, extending existing programs are very important. We have existing programs that are in place that are ending in New York for energy storage. Interim programs that realize value, particularly local capacity and load relief. New York BESS has recommended a asset utilization tariff. We've recommended a load reduction tariff and bridge incentives that are in our filings. We can take you through some of the details of that as we talk today. We believe steps like that are very, very important to get to this, having enough confidence in project development. And then under the Clean Energy Standard, as Rick talked about, the establishment of storage goals is very, very important. And we believe that having a separate framework to address those goals, which we've recommended a flexible energy credit, would be valuable. But critical to all of this, and fundamental, I believe, to all of this, is that even though we're in a transitional period to what I believe is a very, very important path and good path forward, in that transitional period, we need to establish ways to have enough revenue confidence for developers that they can move forward. And that's where I think these suggestions get at the root of achieving that. So I'll end on that and let it go over to Mike.
Thanks, Bill. We'll have questions at the end of the panel. And do you guys want like a 2-minute warning for your 10-minute presentation?
A minus
2-minute
warning?
That's great. Do you want a 2-minute warning? Okay. I'll give you a flashing yellow light and I'll hold up to you. So without further ado, Mike from the New York ISO.
Yeah, you can just turn off the mic.
Yeah, right.
And I'll try to keep it under 10 if we can. First, I'd like to thank the staff for the opportunity for being here today. And we are proud to be part of a state that's got such noble goals, that those goals laid out in the CES white paper. I wanted to reflect a little bit about what New York has done with storage in the past and provide some context that we've been here before. New York already has a vast amount of energy storage resources already integrated into its grid, well over 1,000 megawatts of energy storage. And in 2009, the New York ISO helped pioneer integrating even more energy storage into the grid, where we looked at ways to adapt its market rules to incorporate resources that didn't have long storage capability. That program is referred to as Limited Energy Storage Resource Program, where storage devices can provide regulation service to the grid. Now, those are some things going on with storage, but I wanted to provide some context of what ISO's responsibility is for the grid. We're here to manage and maintain a reliable bulk system. That bulk system spans far outside of New York State. It goes from Florida up to Canada, from the Atlantic Ocean out to the Rockies. And so the ISO has a small part of maintaining that reliability, but it's still critical to making sure that we maintain a safe and reliable interconnected grid. And to do that, we need to think about what services and products are necessary to maintain that reliability. And the ISO has spent many, many years, over a decade, developing those products and services and administering those products and services through competitive markets. And I think we've done a fairly decent job of doing that. And so as we think about what's happening with the future and potentials for increased penetrations of clean energy, highly variable energy, we need to be thinking about what other services will be necessary to help deal with that on the grid. And then once we understand those services, we can then develop what value is available for providing those services. Part of what the ISO is working through is trying to build up from its foundation a gap on what services are missing, or where are there opportunities that could be expanded upon. So for example, in the ISO markets, storage can participate in various ways. We have a program, we refer to it as Energy Limited Resources. That program is really there for storage devices or resources that have limited capability. They can't sustain output for the entire day, but they can sustain output for a large portion of the day. And so they're qualified to provide services such as capacity, iron in the ground, or energy, the balancing service right now, reserves, really that insurance policy for short-term capacity, or regulation, which is the second-by-second balancing of load and energy. Another program we have is the Limited Energy Resource Program, which I spoke about earlier, which allows short duration resources to provide regulation service. And then we also have some programs that deal with resources that are behind the meter providing ancillary services. We refer to that as our demand side ancillary service program. And then lastly, we have a program where, to Bill's point, there is a desire for some reduction in load on the hottest day of the year. And so for those resources that can guarantee they can do that and they're behind the meter, we have a special case resource program where the ISO can call on resources to curtail their load on these critical days. And so we have these programs, but we recognize that there's probably some areas where we can improve upon those capabilities. And so we've started an initiative, we call it the Energy Storage Integration and Optimization Initiative. And that initiative started in March, where we outlined these services and programs that we already have. And what we were looking for is stakeholder engagement and feedback on where are we missing the boat, where are the opportunities that we're just not seeing, and what do we have to do with these programs to relieve some of those barriers or obstacles. And so the ISO looks forward to working with stakeholders. We continue to work on this initiative. You'll see us working on this initiative for the next few years. I was happy to see Bill had it on his slide for 2018, so that's good news for us. And I look forward to working with all of you on these issues and opportunities. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Next, Sharon from AES.
Do you want to give me the...
Oh, yeah. And let me just maximize it before you start.
While he's doing that, I just want to thank the Commission and staff for inviting AES to speak today. And I've got more slides here than I'm going to go through. Thank you. I've got more slides here than I'm going to go through that if you can look at your leisure after the fact, but I'm going to try to hit on a couple high points that I think are of interest and import.
If you just roll the wheel, it'll, yep.
Okay. AES is a global power company. We have operations in the United States and California, the Midwest, Texas, traditional power plants, utilities, as well as storage as an emerging business line within the company. So that's who we are. Right now, we believe, the largest fleet of battery-based storage in the world. We have about 400 megawatts either completed in construction or very late-stage development. There's a slide here that kind of explains where that's at. I'm going to talk about a couple of projects here in the United States and how they interface with renewables, and also a big part of New York Rev, which is T&D alternative. And one of the themes that you'll hear today consistently is you might build something for one reason and use it either a year later or 90% of the time for another reason. That's one of the big advantages of storage versus a traditional, thermal resource such as a peaker. So this slide actually very much mirrors what Bill outlined in terms of what are the big categories for where storage can bring benefits to the grid. It improves the utilization of existing assets, whether they're transmission assets, distribution assets. It supports the integration of more renewables, and it improves grid reliability and security of supply. And like I said, a specific asset can do all of those, and it may be doing different things in different hours of different days. And it costs less than traditional technologies at this point, and basically does more. That's the key message. This next slide is a little bit of a setup for our next speaker, but it also focuses a little bit on who is the customer. When Rick did the introductory stuff, there were questions about who is the customer, or who are you contracting with, how does that happen? It varies a little bit by use, but it can be utilities, it can be traditional independent developers, it can be system operators. We consider the system operator to be a customer because, for example, peaking usage for behind the meter or T&D alternative, 5 days of the year it might be being used for the T&D focus. The rest of the time, it's getting most of its revenue stream from the ISO, traditional ISO programs, as was mentioned earlier by Mike. The other aspect can be commercial industrial. Those are primarily behind the meter, and our afternoon panel, I think, focuses a little bit more on that, but that's the other aspect. The third column here shows what are the uses. Rick will go through that in a little bit more detail in his analysis, but I think he comes up with 8 uses. This is 7. I think we've lumped a few of them together in a couple of the bullet points, but it's a consistent. These are how those uses are typically used by the varying different types of customers. So let's talk about some specific projects in the United States. AES has a wind farm in West Virginia in PJM, and they built a battery project. It was an early battery project. It's a 15-minute duration project. Most projects you're seeing today many are longer duration, 4, 6, up to 12-hour duration. But the batteries were not necessarily put there because it made a whole lot of sense to be with the wind. There were tax benefits of having them there. But and it was primarily built for frequency regulation from the battery project. But one of the things that we've learned is it helps with the ramping of the wind, even though it's a very short duration project. It's not a longer duration load shifting type of aspect. Thanks. This is a picture of Laurel Mountain, very scenic in West Virginia. The next project is the world's largest battery. It's going to be a 100-megawatt project. It'll be completed in 2020 in Southern California, Edison Territory. It was built as part of these initial procurements by the utilities on the roadmap. California had a requirement for local in-the-ground reliability, and they looked at peakers and they looked at batteries. And this was one of the first procurements where the decision was made to go heavily with batteries because the price points worked and because of the additional flexibility that the batteries provided on the system. So while its initial primary focus technically in the procurement process was local capacity reliability, it can be used in a renewables context. It can be used for many reasons. It's going to be 4-hour duration, very similar as to what you might think of as an ELR type application in New York. No emissions or water. The other question that came up earlier was how does the developer get the revenue certainty here? This is dedicated, it's Southern California Edison, but it is a tolling agreement like a traditional peaker as opposed to ownership by the utility. And that flexibility for different ways of providing revenue stream, this is an example of how a traditional tolling arrangement or PPA is being used to provide the revenue certainty for the project. So what is some of the more recent activity? As our introductory speaker mentioned, many of these applications are a little bit further along in California. And what we're seeing now in the West is an increasing focus on distribution network level reliability in front of the meter, but distribution level network reliability. They're smaller systems, 1 to 5 megawatt, but you might see a utility putting in 50 of them all over their system. They're typically 1 hour duration or more, might be 1 hour and 6 minutes, might be 2 hours, depending on what their needs are. They are typically, in this case, to date, they're typically thought of as being owned by the utility, but they also could be contracted with the utility. Lots of different ways of doing that. And especially in California, they do oftentimes looking at targeting feeders with high renewables penetration. As far as New York is concerned, I think you're very aware of the various utility RFPs and RFIs going on, ranging from BQDM to the Long Island LIPA South Fork RFP. Those are initially T&D alternative, classic T&D alternative applications, 4-hour duration. Asset will probably be an ELR asset, which will function as an ELR asset vast majority of the time, and then also New York Rev demo projects. And one last example, this is in Europe, where you have high renewables penetration. This is a European style. This is a European style form of regulation services, and it's a great picture because there's a windmill in the background. But the reality is, The battery's there because that was the best site, not because of the wind farm within the siting of the photo. So, you know, once again, this whole emphasis on flexibility helps with renewables integration, and it also can help with reduced emissions, not just, you know, carbon, but also NOx and SOx when you look at it in a peak or alternative world. And finally, this is my concluding slide. So, you know, we've been closely watching in the last year and a half, the development of REV and the Clean Energy Standard. The primary conclusion that we take away from the white papers is that, yes, we agree that contracting and REC structure changes will reduce and lower costs to consumers ultimately, and will be necessary to get large-scale development done in the state. From a storage perspective, you know, we're here today. I think people are increasingly aware that storage is cost-effective. But like renewables, it's really no different than any development project. Might be less in total cost than a large-scale renewable site, but stable revenue streams are important, whether that's PPAs, whether that's RECs that are known at the time of implementation. It's a consistent theme. That's what's important in terms of getting projects developed.
Thank you, Sharon. Okay, so next is Rick Cutright from GE, who's joining us remotely. So, Rick, can you take control of the WebEx?
Sure. It's not letting me grab the ball. If you can pass it to me.
One sec.
All right. It's heading my way. I think we're getting there.
Okay.
Apologize for the technical difficulties. So while I'm doing this, so I'm Rick Cutright. I lead product management and product strategy for energy storage at GE. I've been in this role with GE for about 6 years now, and it's been an exciting journey to think about how these new technologies are intersecting with changes in the market.
Is there anything I need to do, Rick? Oh,
no,
I think it's
coming.
Working.
The little firewall issue there. All right.
All right, we can see
Let me
you.
know if something's coming through.
Yep, you're good.
Okay. All right. So these are the key points I want to make. I think a lot of these are the same ones Bill made and Sharon and everyone before. I think that the industry has evolved a lot in the 6 years, and we're starting to get some consistency in where we have a vision with New York Best and ESA and other organizations as to where things are heading. The main thing I want to talk about and show is that load profiles matter, and I think there's a need for new metrics. I've started to couple major changes in industries with changes in the metrics that they use to measure themselves. So I think of us now as, in a world of unlimited text and data, we're still trying to charge, by the minute or by the kilowatt hour, as it were in our case. And I think this is part of the transition and the struggle that we go through, and REV is at the forefront of that. I'm going to talk a little bit about system optimization with asset utilization being a key part of that, and needing to have really good understanding of the objectives and the specific constraints and how we plan these assets. The fact that I think everybody realizes that energy storage is very different from other assets. I heard some great examples at the conference that I've been at the last few days, the utility supply chain conference that I'll hit on. And then lastly, kind of the merchant risk aspect and how that's going to maybe inhibit growth within our industry. So moving on, my background is systems engineering and controls. I much prefer pictures to words, so I wanted to show some pictures to kind of visually represent what a lot of these things mean. And it took 6 years to finally get 6 or 7 different benefits for energy storage into a chart that I think is fairly straightforward. So the key thing to look at here is I think most people are familiar with New York's load profile and what a typical peak may look like. And that could be something like that dotted gray line. I think this specific chart is derived from California, but it's not so different from New York. And what's important to think about as we move forward into these future scenarios where we have lots of renewables, and I think the duck curve was the most powerful thing that happened in energy storage because it forced the world to start to think about load profiles. So the duck curve is essentially by adding on solar, you see that big drop in load that dips down during the day, potentially below zero, and then comes back up. And there's a few key points here. I heard before somebody talking about peak shaving, and Sharon was mentioning 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, what the case may be. And what's important when you look at this and think about the future is that as we bring on solar, there's this intersection between solar and storage where the peaks are going to change. So what would have been a long duration, if you look right there underneath of number 2, to shave that same amount of megawatts or gigawatts in this case, it would have taken a lot. But because of the synergy with solar and storage, I can now do that with a much shorter duration, like a 4-hour battery instead. The rest of this just visualizes, I think, where within one day I could be doing frequency regulation as number 4 all day long with like a 4-hour battery. I could scoop up extra renewables in the middle of the day, shave the peak in the afternoon. While doing that, I increased the base load, and it lowered the emissions and increased the efficiency on the traditional assets like the combined cycles, and then also could provide spinning reserves like down at number 5 for when a cloud passes over or there's a wind gust that disrupts that generation. So I like this as a visual way to think about everything that can happen. I think it's important that we allow storage to get credit for all these things, and it's something that not every other asset can do all of those things simultaneously within a day. The other part of that, this is that exact same chart, but now I'm looking at 8,760 hours worth of it. So I'm looking across a year. And a few big things come into play here. Bill referenced, the 100-hour example where you've got the loads. I like to visualize that format. So if you look, about towards the middle, you can see the very tip top of one of those green lines. That is 2 gigawatts of stuff that got used a handful of hours in a year. And the question is, when we built out peakers, we built out transmission, we built out distribution to serve those peaks, what good did those do with the other 8,750 hours of the year? And the answer is that they didn't do very much. So I think looking at not only the daily profile, but the annual profile, this is a great example of where if I shave those peaks, whether it's the 2 gigawatts at the top or the 4 gigawatts or even 8 gigawatts, those energy storage systems without fuel and without emissions can provide ancillary services both to support peak shaving, renewable curtailment all year long, which is something you wouldn't do with the traditional peakers that have been in that role. So when you kind of bring all that together, you can kind of see where you can compare what storage is going to do to the traditional assets. And we can do all these things without storage. We can go to 50% without storage. But by going to 50% renewables, storage is going to make it a lot better. It's going to give us better capacity factors and better asset utilization. So everybody always asks for a thumb rule, and it's a different answer for every system. It's a very complicated question. But generically, I would say there's something kind of like this, that for a system with very low levels of renewables, 10% of your peak capacity is energy storage. With something like a 2-hour, 3-hour battery, it's probably a good no regrets point, as Rick had mentioned earlier. At this point, you're going to utilize that asset very well, doing lots of ancillary services throughout the year, and you're going to have those assets available for the tips of those peaks. I think as you get more and more renewables, as you ramp up from the 25s and the 30s to 50s, and in particular, if a lot of that renewables is solar, the ideal mix would probably something like 25% of your peak is energy storage. And I'll caveat to say this would be if you were building it from scratch. The reality is you've got existing assets and you're coming up with that blended optimization as you transition. But if you were building a grid from scratch and you said you wanted to build a grid to satisfy New York's load, I would say that you should target 25% of your peak generation at about 4 hours, 5 hours of batteries as where you would want to go to serve that mix. So we put together some models. We needed to put together some special models because the existing tools really don't value all those benefits simultaneously. Dispatch models, economic dispatch, even security constrained dispatch do not allow you to fully realized how storage is going to work on the grid. There's lots of tools coming, I think, as an industry, but we're not quite there yet. But this does show, at the 4 gigawatt level that Bill was suggesting, your benefit to cost ratio in the top is still very high. You're getting much less curtailment down on the bottom left because you've got the energy storage to pick up any of that overgeneration. What I don't like about this answer, if you look on the middle chart to the right, is you still have a lot of peak there. You've got a lot of peakers. You still have some assets that are low-hanging fruit because they're only being used in that summertime. So we pushed this a little bit further, and I moved on now to an 8 gigawatt, 32 gigawatt hour case. So this would be 2030 if we had 8 gigawatts and 4 hours of energy storage systems throughout New York. You're now at the point where you almost suppress all peaker operation whatsoever. So you're at 50% of your energy coming from renewables. That size energy storage system on the bottom left has eliminated almost all curtailment. You still have a levelized cost of energy on the top right that's very competitive, much better than without the storage. Your carbon emissions are great compared to where they're at in the 2015 baseline. And you're in a world where you almost eliminated peakers from the mix required to serve New York's load. That entire analysis doesn't look at additional benefits that you would get from avoided costs and upgrades from transmission and distribution. That was fairly much a generation view. So I think especially, in New York City with a lot of the problems that have been on there with Brooklyn, Queens, and those types of issues, there's more value on top of that storage that pans out just from that holistic view in terms of specific asset utilizations and deferrals and things of that nature, as well as other local emissions benefits and things like that. So kind of going back to the key points that I wanted to make, I think I'm coming up on my 10 minutes pretty soon here, is that load profiles matter. When I talk to people, very, very few people in the industry really know what their load profiles look like. People think about annual energy production and they think about system peaks. I think as we transition into distributed generation, we need to have better understanding of load profiles in general to make sure we're optimizing our systems. I think whatever the policy is, it needs to be holistic and think about that same level of system optimization. We need goals around overall capacity factors, capacity values for the grid, the assets that are on the grid, so that we're doing the right optimization for the system for all New Yorkers, not specific entities. The ES is different. The pickup truck perspective, I was at this conference down south. I'd heard lots of other analogies, but the pickup truck one I thought was great. They picked up on it very well there. You wouldn't buy a pickup truck to drive to work in the morning because you're going to get better gas mileage with the Prius, but I'm not going to be able to pick up lumber at the hardware store, take my trash to the dump, or go hunting with the Prius. So if you don't factor in and be able to economically assess all the other things you can do with it, it's going to drive you to an answer that you're not happy with because you still want to do all those other things with your vehicle. Someone made a comparison that it's not generation, it's better wires. I like that one. It's interesting to wrap your head around that concept. Merchant risk, I think more people will talk about it later, but I think the big takeoff we've seen in solar and in wind has been around PPAs and agreements where the financiers don't have to take on merchant risk and the developers don't have to take on merchant risk. I think people like GE and AES and a number of other system integrators are taking on all the technology risk. So back to that knowledge gap question from earlier, I don't think people need to really understand battery chemistry. I think there's plenty of reputable companies now that will take the technology risk and offer performance guarantees on systems. I think the gap to see real growth take off sooner is around the merchant risk and getting PPAs or tolling agreements in place to enable people to get the loans and the financing they need for projects. And the last one that I threw on is a late adder when we think about this is maintenance and verification. I think as we move to distributed generation resources in general, the policy and the incentives that we have in place need to consider maintenance and verification of those assets in order to make sure they are really there when we need them. I used to do combined heat and power systems and work in the heating space a little bit. And they used to talk about 70 to 80% of the hardware failures occurred on 1 of 2 days, the first cold day of the winter or the coldest day of the winter, because people didn't do the maintenance. They didn't test ahead of time to make sure things were going to work. So I think it's problematic for your home heating system. It would be a really big deal if we moved on to that hot summer peak and a lot of the assets that were located on the grid hadn't been verified, didn't have the proper maintenance, and weren't there when we needed them. So as we think about policy, I think we need to think about performance guarantees, testing, validation, things of that nature to be a part of those programs. And that's it for me.
Thanks, Rick. All right, so let's move on to Dan Vickery from Green Charge Networks. I'm going to pull your slide up in just 1 sec, sorry.
So quick introduction, Dan Vickery, lead market development at Green Charge Networks.
Working now. Dan Vickery, I lead market development at Green Charge Networks, and as they mentioned, we appreciate being here. So thank you guys very much, and thanks to Matt for leading the initiative on that. So I'll give a brief intro on Green Charge Networks. We're not an EV charging company. We are a developer of energy storage on behind the meter for C&I industry. We're one of the largest in the space. We have 50 megawatt hours under contract with host customers. And we actually spun out of, we started in New York with a Con Ed and DOE demonstration project, spun out of that and grew to California. We're interconnected in 6 utilities, again, New York and California. And our business model really is a shared savings model that's 100% financed and owned by Green Charge. So we'll develop a system on the customer site, and we'll share in any savings we can generate from that site. And most recently, we were acquired by ENGIE, which is probably better known as GDF Suez to everyone in this room, which I think is a sign of the times that the world's largest IPP is getting into the behind-the-meter energy storage space. Just real quick, customers we work with, very well-known companies. These companies are adopting energy storage with scale. I know everyone likes seeing projects. The project in the middle, that is on 43rd Street in Manhattan on a roof. We shut down 43rd Street to get that thing on the roof. The other projects are mostly in California, and on the bottom right you can see a solar storage project. So the couple things I really want to drill home today, I think everyone has mentioned that energy storage is a critical grid asset for the T&D grid. And it reduces costs, and it can help drive higher renewable penetrations. In New York specifically, you have a network by network issue. As renewables further penetrate the grid, you're going to have substantial issues. You're going to have backfeeding in network trips. If a network in under Times Square trips, that's going to be hard to set back up. And each network, from Green Charge's side, Rick went over kind of the high level, or the 1,000-foot view of the New York ISO grid. Where Green Charge comes in is we surgically put capacity on very targeted networks, which each of those things each have their merit. And again, from also from Green Charge's side and from other developers that are in our space, aggregation is key. There are small systems individually, but when you put hundreds of small systems on a network, that means a lot of scale on that network. And finally, this solution is technologically proven. I'll show you a lot of slides here that we're not in the R&D stage anymore. We're in the market deployment stage, and that's where I think the industry is in general. So if you look at the value stacking, this is it starts with the retail demand charge bills, or retail energy bills, I should say. This darkest blue line, that's your initial building load profile. It's peaking around about 1.8 megawatts. You put solar on, you get to that light green line. You put solar and storage on, you firm that up, and you can reduce your demand charges 3 or 4 times as much as with solar. And energy storage, or solar with energy storage, you can double savings. Obviously, this is a representative site. It's one of our sites we've analyzed, but it's pretty indicative of a lot of the analysis we do. More importantly, solar is going to go away from time to time. There's cloud cover. What you see in this image, the green, let's start with the orange. The orange is a building load profile that has a solar system on site, and in the middle of the day, clouds come over or the inverter trips on the solar, and you see massive spikes. This is only a 300 kilowatt spike, which to most utilities is not very major. When that happens at scale, that is a huge issue. With energy storage, we completely wiped out that spike on the grid and kept it to that green color, the green background, and shifted that energy to eliminate that intermittency on the local grid. when you look at, so, the use case I just showed is a retail behind the meter, demand charge reduction for host customers. That is, Green Charge's core, but that's one of our many of the services we provide. Any system we put in is a multi-use system. It provides multiple benefits, and many of those benefits are really, hopefully, what we're here to discuss is how do we open up those revenue streams in the wholesale market from the utilities and from other entities. So if you look at the three major issues that I think New York is dealing with, especially under a 50% RPS, right in the middle, you have Con Edison's low duration curve, very well known to probably most folks in the room. And Bill mentioned it earlier that if you flatten 100 hours of this, it's about $1.2 billion in savings per year. On the left is the intermittency issue of solar, and on the right is the backfeeding issue of solar, the duck curve. I think energy storage is a major player for all three of these things, and including with a single system. So if you look at, I'm going to pull us to a couple more examples from California of the programs we're participating in. This is a program that in the middle of the day we're peak shaving, we recharge, and then provide capacity to the utility at night. This capacity, whether it's for resource adequacy, whether it's for economic, wholesale dispatch, whether it's for T&D deferral, it doesn't really matter. We're providing it. And the contracts with the utility vary, but they're there. We have the contracts with the utility, and we can, count on that revenue stream. Again, back to this, image. I think it was Bill that mentioned earlier. A redundant grid with backup natural gas plants isn't what we're going for. If you can back up the solar and firm that solar with an asset that is also being used with multiple other, solutions, it's much more cost effective to the entire, ratepayer base and New York State overall. And finally, the backfeeding issue. Backfeeding will become an issue when we get to 50%, especially if you're looking at network by network. The whole grid may not be backfeeding, but on any given day, there could be issues on a given network. This is, again, we're charging the battery in the middle of the day to prevent that backfeeding, and then, charging up again later in the afternoon, and all while peak shaving and saving energy on a customer bill. The point I really want to make today is it doesn't have to be connected to solar PV to provide that service. This is a program we're participating in California. It's called the Excess Supply Pilot. We're effectively charging to eliminate, California is testing out this issue of, okay, so what happens when we need to curtail solar or when we need to curtail the grid? We can charge at any given time, whether or not we're with solar. So, there's questions of, when we get to the REC conversation of how do we do this in context of renewables, I think there does need to be some mechanism that doesn't necessarily need to co-locate these services, because energy storage can provide these services no matter where it is, and it's very valuable to the grid. So the three images I just showed you, or four images I just showed you, those are site by sites, but those are all part of aggregations. We are aggregating systems and providing that capacity to the utility. These, they're for a variety of reasons. Again, whether it's network peak relief, whether you're curtailing solar, whether you're providing resource adequacy, or just bidding economically into wholesale markets, it doesn't matter. The aggregating these systems and providing meaningful capacity to utilities and to the ISO is where this industry is going, and there are a few barriers, but there's a lot of progress that's been made to date. So we do appreciate the ISO and others for doing that. Just some of the programs that I just highlighted. In New York, we were part of the demand management program in our initial Con Ed pilot demonstration. And in California, the demand response auction mechanism, supply side pilot, excess supply pilot, and various other programs. Again, at the pilot stage, but how California went about this process was kind of get capacity into the ground and then open up these pilots. So if I look at the barriers that we're dealing with, first is performance and experience. I think we're there in terms of performance. Capital cost reduction, what we need there is more competition and potentially incentives, whether it's through a REC program or an SCHIP equivalent. Development cost certainty. This is a natural, regulatory function, but more so it's on the experience level. The more experienced the developers are, the more certainty we'll have there. So, I think that one is on us. Revenue availability and certainty and regulatory risk, I think that's what we're here really to discuss today. Long-term contracts simply don't exist to the extent we need them to today. And, as I always say, New York is by far the most attractive market for energy storage, but it's easily the riskiest market at this point. We know there's a lot of changes coming, but we don't necessarily know exactly where that's going, so that stalls some development. And, real quick, just to close out, the three barriers that I look at is, a lack of certainty in the direction of the state, and maybe a commitment could resolve that. Bill mentioned a 4 gigawatt mandate. Lack of investor assurance, again, we get around that through certainty in prices through possibly a REC market. And then lack of market mechanisms, we need to start opening up pilot programs and have new, market-oriented programs for us to participate in. So, how'd I do?
All right, thanks, Dan. So if people have questions, could you please queue up at the podium?
Just logistics. I know your agenda called for lunch now, which I assume we're not going to do.
We have another 15 minutes.
Another 15 minutes? Yeah, I want to suggest that we extend another 15 minutes beyond that, maybe cut into lunch a little bit.
Okay, that sounds good.
Couple of questions. One, you talked about potential no regrets level of penetration. That's a language regulators like, no regret solutions. So is there an analysis that the industry has that shows this quantity in New York at this time or in the next number of years should be considered no regrets, and this is the backup for the benefits and costs?
There is not a specific focus analysis as you just asked for, Raj. There is a piece from the roadmap, and then pieces that individual entities have done, like what you just saw from GE. That is something that probably could be put together pretty quickly.
I think that would be very helpful. The second quick question to Dan or others is, in California, the mandate is half of it has to be procured by the utility, local utility. And given your involvement and your entrepreneurship in putting these together, do you have any strong feelings of the role of the utility in this space? What does it mean to competitive providers versus utilities owning these systems?
From our side, we'd prefer that we own them. I think there's certainly a play for both sides to own. With that mandate, part of that is allowed for, I think it might be half of the ownership can be third-party developers, which I think strikes a reasonable balance for kind of navigating a new area.
So we'll go to the podium. If you could introduce yourself and ask the question.
Okay. My name is Herschel Spector. I'm president of Micro Utilities Incorporated. I'd like to return to that very nice graph that Mike put up showing the enormous impact of getting rid of the peakers, billions of dollars. And of course, we assume that those savings in part will accrue to the customers. And as a consumer of electricity here in New York, that pleases me a lot. I want to point out that the problem of getting rid of the peakers and all the savings that would accrue to that, plus the reduction in greenhouse gases as you get rid of these peakers and air quality issues and so forth, that problem, I believe, is about to be solved. And I will talk about that briefly. And also associated with the solution of that problem, I believe there's going to be a yet unrecognized challenge for distributed energy resources. It seems that when you look closely at storage, sometimes it's a two-edged sword. helping in one area and challenging in another. How is that problem going to be solved? Right now, New York State is embarking on a new program to work with a company called ICE Energy, who's been doing a lot of sales out west. Basically, they have a system that uses off-peak electricity at night to make ice. They use that ice during the warmer hours the following day to reduce the air conditioning load. The air conditioning load is the load which has driven the load factors in New York State to terrible condition. Back around the mid-60s, the load factors, for those of you who don't know what load factor is, it's the percentage of the time that the fleet is being used. Well, that years ago, around the mid-60s, they were around 68%. Today, it's down to 50%. And I recall Richard Kaufman saying no business could survive if they only use their equipment 50% of the time, but that's what we have in New York. That problem will largely be solved, I believe, by ice storage at night with off-peak prices using a technology that's already been out in the field and well proven. Incidentally, it's energy storage, but it's thermal energy storage. It's not batteries. The second part is that what would that mean for distributed energy resources? Distributed energy resources, of course, has to compete on price, but the price of electricity from the utility will decrease significantly once you have the ice storage. Distributed energy resources has a benefit in that it will reduce greenhouse gases, but so will the removal of the peaker plants. They're in basically the same market. So while everybody agrees that you need energy storage to enhance distributed energy resources, this very big application of thermal energy storage may be a big challenge for DER. And finally, there's intertwined in this is a policy consideration. When you look at the goals of the state, some of the goals will speak to reducing greenhouse gases. Some of the goals will be to make the economic burden on the consumers lower, et cetera, et cetera. It's not clear that all of these goals can be met simultaneously. And that's an issue, I think, worthy of discussion going forward. Thank you very much.
Does anyone want to respond, or should we move on to the next question?
I would point out that the gentleman's right. Ice energy, thermal storage is a very important vehicle, and when we speak of storage, we actually include that into our bundling of storage.
Hi, Britt Reifenborn, Chenerud, Con Edison. This is a question for Mike from the NISO, or maybe also for GE. Do you see the value of energy storage systems that can discharge greater than 4 hours increasing over time? I don't know what the GE model says about that, or I don't know what the NISO's thought is about that, and how to incentivize systems that have longer durations than 4 hours.
That's a fantastic question.
I could start if you want. It was one of the points I was going to mention. I think as the product manager for GE, I would like to see people buy lots of high power frequency regulation systems like have been deployed in PJM. But as a New Yorker who pays electric bills here and taxes and whatnot, I think we shouldn't be looking at building energy storage systems that are shorter than something like 2 hours, because the interconnect, the inverters, the transformers, the controls are identical whether I had 15 minutes worth of batteries or 2 hours worth of batteries. I would rather see 2, 3, 4 hour systems go in so that we get not only the ancillary services benefits, but we've also laid the foundation for the shifting and the renewables and the peak shifting and all those other benefits. So I think it was great for PJM, and it coincided with where the technology was at. I don't think other people should repeat that exact process. I think it's important that I think any 4 hour system can do ancillary services and will do it the majority of the time throughout the year. And the larger the batteries get, the less impact you have on life associated with doing those ancillary services. So it starts to become a low tax, service for those resources to provide. So I think however we think about bringing those together, it's important that you can simultaneously do everything, including the frequency regulation, frequency response, volt VAR support in that mix.
And just a clarification, I guess it's all relative. When I say longer timescales, I'm not just talking about like super short timescales to 4 hours, but even like beyond 4-hour discharges. If you see those becoming of value.
I'm not a fan of durations longer than 4 or 5 hours because when I look at the load profiles and I think about the use cases, especially when you're looking at renewables, there's the time period over which I need to charge and discharge. So while I may want to discharge over a long period of time, I'm going to want more power on those systems so that I can scoop up the renewables as they're available. And that tends to pull me back towards a 6, 5, or 4 hour where I'm charging during that over generation. So I may charge for 4 hours when I've got a lot of extra solar, and then I may discharge that over the course of 8 hours in an evening or overnight. So the power to energy ratio is probably more appropriate than duration, although we all use duration more commonly.
I think just to add on to that, when the ISO is looking at the load duration curves and looking at the load profiles for the system, what we are starting to see is that the load just doesn't go away as quickly as it once did. It hangs in longer and longer and longer. And so to the extent that we do rely on a device that is a limited energy device, some form of storage, we need to be thinking about how much of that we need to get us through the no longer 2 or 3 hours of peak, but it's really now 4 to 6, it's approaching 7. And as we flatten that out, it's going to get longer and longer, where we're not starting up conventional units anymore to meet that longer area because the next marginal resource is potentially a storage device. And so as we think about that, we're thinking about it in the form of building blocks. What we don't understand yet is where that real cost benefit from a size perspective really hits the sweet spot. And so we're looking at it from a perspective of how do you build up multiple assets to get you to the total product you need. And so that's what you're going to see the ISO focused on as we roll out things like aggregations of DERs and the like.
Thank you.
If I could add, I think this is a key lesson learned from the BQDM work, is that as opposed to thinking about one block doing everything, of looking at it in building blocks, as Mike just said. So you get 8 hours from 2 4-hour systems. You can kind of combine them in different ways, and those kinds of things become important.
Hi, Erica Helson from Sustainable CUNY at the City University of New York. So a few of the presentations hit on this need for a target, and I think that's really important in setting our policies moving forward. So New York Best set some targets in the roadmap, and then Rick from GE also suggested some other targets. So I'm wondering who should be taking the lead? Is that going to come out of the REV process? How do we set those goals for the optimal level of storage?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's what I was trying to elicit. For us to set some goals, we need some rational basis and some analytical work. And I think Bill promised that he'll take that on and get us some analysis that will help build the record. So,
in that same vein, there's the opportunity for demonstration projects. And for folks that may not be aware, Con Edison has recently, or is in the midst of conducting and evaluating a solicitation for demonstration projects focused on storage, and I assume we'll hear something about that this afternoon. So there's lots of opportunity to help build up our level of knowledge, and I'm very keen for this panel, particularly for the afternoon panel, to go beyond stating the challenge and suggesting some specific actions. So setting a target is fine. If anybody has at this time ideas about where that target should be set or how large it might be, I'm very happy to hear it. I take the point on the need for revenue certainty. There's lots of ways to do that. We've heard some of them, particularly in the context of REV and the CES. If there are specific ideas, some have been offered. Those are things that I think we'd like to explore today beyond just listing them on a PowerPoint.
Hi, Brian LeCamp, CEO of Totem. Dan, I have a question for you. You made an interesting comment about marrying solar and storage, not necessarily co-located. Can you give any more color on some of the opportunities around that, how you're thinking about that, or how Green Charge is thinking about that?
Well, I think one of the questions today was, would co-located solar and storage get a higher, benefit in the CES? And why I wanted to bring that up was you can still curtail the grid if a solar plant down the road is overproducing. It can provide the same exact services, whether it's behind that same meter or just co-located. That's really what I was referring to.
If I could comment on that one, I think lots of people are very interested in that. In particular, there's ITC tax credit benefits to co-locating storage with solar right now. But early on, like 6 years ago when I started, the big naysayers for storage would talk about the benefits of averaging the noise, whether it's generation or load noise on the grid, before you try to solve the problem. So I think whether it's demand charges, in a building or excess generation in the building, if you can roll that up one more tier to a feeder or to a distribution substation, any extra that I had at one building that I needed in another, or things of that nature that can balance each other out without charging and discharging a battery, is going to be better for the system because it's less throughput, less life and less batteries that were required to solve the problem. So I think there's an optimum in there, whether the asset is physically located there, but you're controlling and managing those assets based on a next level up, where you're taking advantage of that natural noise cancellation that's occurring within a complicated system.
Go ahead, Jason. I've got a question for Mike, and it's a practical question. So many of the benefits that have been talked about with cost savings, with emissions reduction, have to do with retiring peakers, regardless of whether those are being retired because of reducing peak load or because they're not being used to firm renewables. And I understand part of this has to do with a level of confidence in the storage asset being dispatchable and reliable. But I wonder if you could spend a moment just speaking from a reliability standpoint. What do we actually need to be envisioning in the future to enable some of the less efficient peakers to actually come offline?
So I think the first thing we need to be thinking about is how are we going to get the power to the areas we need it the most? And so to the extent today we have a fleet that has been historically located right in the load centers, right on top of where we need it the most, that has provided some fantastic resiliency for the city of New York, Long Island, the really highly populated centers. And so it's not clear to me that there's a lot of space left to install large storage devices in these load centers. But that said, if you could get around it if you had expanded the transmission capability to get power into those load centers. As you think about the services that we are procuring and managing for maintaining reliability on the grid, I spoke about a few. You've got long-term capacity where we're really just making sure that we have enough resources to meet that peak load. We have the energy product where that's our 5-minute product. We settle that on a 5-minute basis. That's fantastic for our storage resource to get some value. We, in the market, allow resources to vary their offers hour to hour, which will help them manage those situations where they find themselves discharging at a rate that's greater than they anticipated and need to kind of back that off, tap the brakes, so to speak. But where I think we get most nervous about all of this stuff is when you start to think about situations where there is a system event. We talk about nice uniform load profiles, and then we talk about how the day in and day out load profile may change. We haven't really spoke spoken a lot about what happens when that event occurs on the system. And I'm not talking about an event where we lose half a network in Manhattan. I'm talking about an event where we lose 1,000 megawatts of capability into the city, or we lose a large resource outside of the city, or we lose some other piece of infrastructure that's critical to maintaining that balance. That's where I think we really need to be cognizant of the fact that, yeah, a peak sheave might only require a 4-hour asset, but when we get ourselves in a situation where we've run out of short notice resources to start to deal with that issue, we're going to need to have building blocks where we can extend that need and extend the use of those storage devices to cover what a peak power plant does today. So when we start up a peak power plant today, we start it up for that immediate need, not knowing if this situation remedies itself in the next 10 minutes or it doesn't remedy itself until the next day. And so those are the things that I don't know how to predict. I don't know how to tell you to predict them to figure out exactly how much storage to go build.
And to that one question, I would like to address the space issue. And this is we had some New York legislators over in Northern Ireland where we built a 10 megawatt storage project recently. And the most interesting comment that I think came out of it was, wow, this is smaller than a lot of restaurants in Manhattan. So, and I have a slide that I didn't put up today that basically talks about the fact that batteries are great for the urban because it is a very small footprint. People ask, what is size? 10 megawatt, rule of thumb, 13,000 square feet. That can be outside in containers, in a building, in a warehouse. So that is one advantage. And frankly, we put many projects on retired power plant locations, including the big one in California. So that's a pretty typical.
Just to add some context, what I was speaking about, when we talk about the peaking plant fleet, we're talking about more than 3,000 megawatts of peaking power plants, and so that's the scale of retirements that I think might be alluded to. I'm not sure that's what was alluded to in the slides, but that is what we rely on day in and day out to deal with our reliability needs in New York.
If I may, in thinking about the challenge of siting in urban areas, I wonder if anybody in the panel could comment on the barriers of permitting.
I can address that a little bit, I can address that a little bit. So it was mentioned earlier that there are lots of different battery chemistries. So we have, there are classic lead acid chemistries that are in many, many buildings as UPS systems already and are in the fire code and building code, et cetera. Then you have newer chemistries like lithium ion that we have a lot of experience with it. We're all carrying them on our bodies today, but they're not in the fire and building codes for going into the city. So for indoor applications, you need to go through an exception special process in New York City. That's now getting worked out. We've had now a 1.5 experience with that, and things are moving forward. NYSERDA and Con Ed funded some particular testing that the New York City Fire Department was interested in, and those results are being finalized and coming forward right now. So we're now moving forward with moving from what is a very long time frame process. I mean, it was a 1.5 type of time frame process to get things through with the first couple times through to something that's faster that eventually becomes standardized. One ramification of that is that the Con Ed DMP program has 15 megawatts of batteries queued up that didn't get through that approval process quickly enough with the building department. So there's a real need to extend that program because they're now getting approved and we can now get them in. So I think that we had work to do there. We did a lot of work over the past 1.5. We still have a little bit of work to do, but we're really on the right trajectory to get these routinely installed.
And in terms of barriers, in terms of how quickly you can build something, the project itself is really quick, months. The issues are interconnection, which one set of rules at the distribution level. These in front of the meter projects in the city are basically typical going in the distribution system. and the general building permits, fire being one of the ones that's been evolving.
I would add, I think we're close to being there. It's the same technology going in the same building every time, so a pre-approval process or something along those lines. You know, the battery I put here is the same as the battery I put there, so that could help speed things along.
Let me just follow up on the co-location issue. Question for Dan and Rick. Do you have specific analysis that shows the value streams of solar locating by itself, storage by itself, and then coupled together at the same location? Are there synergies? Are there additional distribution value streams that you can derive by co-locating as opposed to being at different locations? Is there some analysis both from reliability enhancement and value streams in terms of avoided cost to the utilities?
From a reliability perspective, the value is if your if your inverters are tied together, and you could add, you could have essentially a microgrid. Where we would come in is, solar storage more on the retail demand savings side. There's substantial benefits when you put them together. It's kind of that 1 + 1 = 3 argument. On the network level, so the third component is you have slightly less efficiency losses if they're together. But for me, I see if you're on the network level and you have one building and then the next building has, different technologies, but they work together, I think you have similar benefits there. We have plenty of analysis on the retail side.
I think if you could share that, that would be very helpful too.
All right, so 25 minutes after the hour, this is probably a good time to break. If we could limit it to a half-hour lunch, that would be good. So if we could start back up, let's aim for 1 o'clock. We'll start back up at 1 o'clock. Just so everybody knows, there's a deli like right across the street on Vesey Street. So it's pretty close by. Thank you.
Just cater it.
Okay, so for the second panel, we're going to be talking about integrating storage into the REV and CES framework. We'll start off with Doug Staker from Demand Energy, Solar City, represented by Carlos Gonzalez, Jinjin Huang from Con Edison, then Cameron Brooks from SunVerge, Mike Jackson from Advanced Microgrid Solutions, and then we'll end the panel with Sarah Van Cleve from Tesla Energy. And then at that point, we'll have a Q&A session. So again, after all the panelists are done, you can queue up at the panel. There was a little bit of trouble with people hearing the panelists last time. So if you could make sure that you're talking into the mic and maybe make sure that the speakers are picking you up. I think that's everything. Okay, so without further ado, I will hand it off to Doug Staker.
Great, thanks, Matt. Everybody hear me okay? Make sure okay.
Yeah, just you can move the mics around, yep.
There we go, how's that?
Tell people to speak loud. I thought it was just because I'm getting older.
It's just because we're all shy. Okay. Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate the invite to participate on this panel. One of the things that, I like to point out that just 2 buildings away from here, we built our first behind-the-meter energy storage system that's been operating for 4 years over here in the Barclay Tower. So every day it's been optimizing savings for the owner and helping support the grid as far as load shaping. So, as we look back and try to point out, what does storage really do for the grid? I like to say that the grid is really a perfect just-in-time inventory system. Generation has to have enough capacity, transmission has to have enough capacity, distribution to match the load that's required at the edge of the grid. So there's been lots of discussions about the value proposition along the way, co-locating storage with generation, co-locating storage on the transmission system, co-locating storage on the distribution system, and then finally putting storage out at the edge of the grid. And we believe that provides the most opportunity to drive a value proposition behind storage. And one of the points that I like to talk about when we talk about a clean energy standard, and this is, a real-world scenario that we like to point out. Oh, yep. Okay, thanks. Multitasking here. Not a task I do well. So one of the areas that when we talk about clean energy standard and optimizing the existing fleet is a case in point where there's a lot of generation during the day that is load following generation. And load following generation usually goes idle for a certain segment of the period, usually through the trough of the day. Now, a lot of combined cycle plants actually, to achieve that, what they do is they turn down their steam loop. So instead of generating electricity through steam in a second turbine, they just eject that heat just out into radiators into the sky. Now, what that does as far as when you look at heat rate for the kilowatt hours produced, it takes something that when they have both cycles running during their load following operation, it really transformed that system back into a single cycle generation cycle. So it changes the heat rate from 6,000 BTUs to 9,000 BTUs per kilowatt hour. So when we talk about clean energy and improving, the efficiency, better load capacity or grid utilization, I think there's some aspects to think about what storage brings by, and this doesn't get discussed enough, I don't think, the ability to create load at off-peak. So if you think about if we could have corresponding load, and we can match load with generation very easily, and how the market mechanisms put in place, not quite sure. There's many different ways to look at it, bilateral agreements, things through congestion pricing, things that we do today just in the wholesale market by and large. And if you could create load and move that generation to allow them to run that secondary cycle, take that electricity, move it through the transmission system, move it through the distribution system when they have lower line losses, that really is energy efficiency and improving greenhouse gas reduction and optimization. That's one just thought process to bear in mind as we look to what can storage do to drive value from a clean energy standard perspective. This is a graph from the Pacific Northwest, and this is in a time period where there was a lot of wind moving in line and there was a lot of contention out there because in the Bonneville Power Administration system up there, they have to balance hydro supply with demand. And in the springtime, this time of year, we get really good wind, a lot of good wind moving through, but we get a lot of water flow through the snowmelt. So we've got a balance of, and then on top of that, we're trying to mitigate around fish, migration of salmon and steelhead. And there's some rules about if you're a hydro generator, you got to run the water through the turbine, which puts less dissolved gases into the water. So BPA started reaching out to the wind guys and turning them down because, as you can see, a lot of the wind generation here in the blue line is 180 degrees out of phase with where the peak is for the day. So there was an argument. They took them to court. FERC sided with the wind generators and just said, look, you just can't discriminate and go out and reach and turn off wind. You have to have a better economic argument here. Well, caught between getting penalized by National Marine Fisheries or getting sued by the wind guys, BPA did what they thought was the right thing. So again, if we look at what storage could do very easily during these non-coincident periods, storage that's located at the edge of the grid can react. We have the control systems, we have the metrics, we have the meters. We can build certainly off of signals like AGC or whatever and be able to manage and control load when needed, as needed, to support better integration of wind resources. As we look at trying to move load through transmission and the distribution system off peak, you start to look at what's the effect of reducing line loss. Because we talk about transmission capacity, distribution capacity. And when you look at losses in distribution systems, they're not linear. It's a squared function. It's a function really of the amperage that causes line loss. So if you looked at the ratio of the peak on July 19th here in the city in 2013, the ratio of trough to peak was about 1.41 to 1, 1.46. So it's not that if you were going to move energy through the distribution system at that time off peak, that it's just a 1.46 to 1 ratio. It's really a squared function as far as what the reduction would be. So by being able to move, thank you. You and I are both lacking here, Matt. When you look at that, really being able to move that energy out to the edge, cache it, and use it for peak shaving, there's benefits that we see in the form of line loss reduction. And when you look at line loss reduction in the summer, Con Ed has an average rate of about 9.9% line loss. Now remember, that's average rate. And the way line losses typically measure is they measure energy generated over a period and then energy metered over the same period, and they look at the differential between there. Well, that is a true averaging. So if you looked at the ratio that the line loss at peak versus the trough is a 2-to-1 ratio, that tells you that line loss at peak's around 13%. So when we're generating about 13 gigawatts of peak demand out here, 10% of that's 1.3 gigawatts. That's a big number. So being able to optimize and turn the distribution system into a managed system has a lot of benefit. And what's difficult is some of the market structures that we have. There are probably tools and mechanisms that we can price that around, but that's why we're supportive of storage being able to earn credits. Another key point that I'll talk about is one of the things that we're doing out in Brooklyn, Queens on a project is how do we take solar that tends to peak from about 10 a.m. to about 2 p.m. as far as max output and match it with load out in BQDM where the peak period is basically 7 p.m. till 11 p.m. So being able to, not that the grid can't use that excess energy midday, but it has higher value at 7 at night till 11 at night. And being able to store it, time shift it, and generate that's, I think, another element that shows storage with flexibility to provide better utilization of that resource at a time when it's needed and does all the things that we just talked about as far as line loss reduction, better grid adjustment. Okay, let's skip that. Everybody knows my story about rates. We need more rates, more hourly data. I'll stop there. Just in conclusion, really, storage is here. It's nothing technological that can't occur. We believe that storage should follow what New York Best has put out there, a flexible energy credit. Just due to the fact that it can create load and it can supply generation. Storage is remote. It doesn't need to be co-located. We can react very fast. Storage has that capability to firm up intermittent resources, be it wind or solar, wherever they're located. And then just the overall improvement in greenhouse gases in the current fleet, we think that has substantial benefit. And to be truthful, the generators hate it because we're taking away that peaking power, which they earn the most on. So naturally, we're going to see resistance. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Doug.
Ideal situation, but okay.
Next up, we have Carlos Gonzalez. I'll let you take it away. And excuse me, I'm just going to be messing around for 1 minute. But do you want to steer or should I steer? Okay. Just let me know next slide or whatever. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So again, Carlos Gonzalez with Solar City. And we were asked today to present on the business model for solar plus storage and also talking a little bit about our current projects. So we're here. Let's go to the next one, Matt, just for a sec. So 3 key messages that we have here. I know you've all heard quite a bit on the multiple use application today. I think we just wanted to add the emphasis on the virtue of being behind the meter, how you can address more of those multiple use applications, and kind of our vision of how we try to enable that. The second one is that, well, we're encouraged by, the emergence of those multiple use applications, and there's a limited opportunity right now for some of those to be commercially viable. So having that commercial mindset, one of the things that we wanted to propose here is we're not set on what that number should be or what, but from a concept perspective, that perhaps to animate markets right now, to the extent that there's a gap that we could leverage some sort of incentive to move the market forward. So we'll get into that in a little bit. So just to go to the multiple use applications that I was talking about, everybody has touched on these, but we explicitly break them down between what we can provide to the customer, to the distribution grid, and into the wholesale markets. And let's go to the next, Mac. I think RMI put together a very good visual about this, and the way they described it was that by virtue of being the deepest into the grid, the behind-the-meter resources are the ones that are more capable of doing the most of these values to the grid. So that's the mindset we have taken. And then from that behind-the-meter perspective, I'm going to talk about what we released in Hawaii to unleash those values. But let me step back for a second. Let's go to the next. And just describe the 3 types of business models that we have currently. The first one, it's in Hawaii. We did a deployment of 17 megawatts. The use case that was used by the Kauai Island Co-op was to shave a peak that was going from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. So this was a great example of a dispatchable large-scale solar. So that's pretty encouraging. We're trying to do the same with Connecticut Municipal Co-op as well. That's another large-scale deployment. It's 13 megawatts. So that's our first piece. The second one, Matt, let's go to the next. One before. There we go. It's the demand logic product. You're all pretty familiar. Some of you spoke this morning about the main business case here is shaving those demand charges. What you see there in the graphs is to the left is an industrial load profile. What you see there at the top is literally the peaks when you're hitting peaks during the day. And then the one to the side is once you have implemented the battery, how you shave those demand charges. So that's the key economic driver for those commercial applications. And then finally, at the residential level, let's go to the next. Here, it's just the whole portfolio that we have released in Hawaii. The idea there is to aggregate homes and offer them as a resource for the utility. Potentially here, what we are proposing in Hawaii is a self-contained home that can really manage that load for self-consumption, and it's not just storage, it's other load resources as well. So here we're talking about a thermostat and other devices that can be a comprehensive system. So the way we are trying to make this work for New York is the aggregation of resources, but as I mentioned earlier, to the extent that we can move them in sync with what the utility needs, provide that grid those services to the grid. So just to recap here then, where we stand on the business model. Today, the batteries are providing reduction on energy and customer demand charges. We can increase the solar self-consumption, and we also have the backup power value. Going next, we heard earlier today that Mike suggesting increased ability to deliver value to the New York ISO through capacity or ancillary services. And then from what we've seen, there's a pretty positive development from the utilities to do more non-wires alternatives. In fact, we're pretty eager to see what comes out of the Pomona opportunity and ONR that I think we're expecting by this summer. and we're expecting more of those to come out. But the vision would be that we have those portfolios providing those grid services. And then what's next? There's three pieces there. One is the potential development of smart home rates. The idea there would be some sort of opt-in rate for homes that have that capability of whole comprehensive load management. The other one is to the extent that we develop hosting capacity methodologies with the utilities, and there's opportunities to perhaps enable capabilities with smart inverters. That's potential additional revenue streams. And the last one is, those distribution services that I mentioned, such as VVO. So let's skip this one, Matt. One more. So when we talk about what's holding us back, we just wanted to provide a really quick summary of what are the things that we could be addressing. From a rate design perspective, the customer demand charges sometimes are not really aligned with those distribution system peaks. So that's a great one to get started. I think we all help ourselves and help the utilities if we can make those match. The other one is from a TOU rate perspective. Those are great developments. One of the things we've looked at it when you get into the weeds is that the inter-period netting may not be the best setup. So what I'm talking about there is, can you offset super peak kilowatt hours with peak kilowatt hours, or could you offset winter kilowatt hours with summer? That's something that, it's just a design question, but it could really make the economics go far. That's one. The second one is market eligibility. What I'll talk about here is that some of those other programs that you can participate, let's say CSRP, the ICAP special case resource, and others are great positive opportunities for us to participate. Some of them explicitly may have exclusions for NEM customers. And there may be reasons for that, but to the extent that we could talk about modifying those rules, you may be able to really get into stacking those values. And the same applies to timing of markets. One example I have there is the utilities needs. Sometimes we talked earlier that perhaps the need is typically 4 hours, potentially even longer. Could we get into a situation where resources can provide those values within 15-minute increments rather than being required to dispatch the full 4 hours? So that's one. Measurement and verification. Here it gets to cost. So sometimes the metering requirements may be overly costly. So that's one to take a look. The other one, this is a little bit more nuanced, but it relates to how the utility measures that shave. And some of the utilities prefer to have a customer baseline versus measured inverter output. And there may be opportunities to do that more transparently. Interconnection, I'm not going to belabor this one, but there was a good development in the new SIR rules. From that development, we still don't see a direct addressing of storage for those rules, so that's another opportunity to improve. Permitting, I think I see DG Hub folks here in the room, so I just wanted to say thanks for all the work you've done to get the Department of Buildings and New York New York City Fire Department to really move the ball in getting those technologies approved, and also give transparency to the market on what else we need from permitting perspective. And then last one, just some market values may just not exist today. And so the final punchline I have here is just a call for, what can we do to perhaps animate the market. The way we see it is that we try to extract as much as possible revenue streams from the market. The first stack, of course, what you can derive from the customer. Then, to the extent we can have utility contracts for services we can provide to the grid, or participation in the ISO. And even in those cases, you may still have a gap to cover the full battery cost. So where do we go from here? And the suggestion is to have a stepping down incentive that could close that gap. We know what the path forward is for declining cost of batteries. So you would get into the far right chart here, where the costs have come down, the incentive is gone, and your opportunity to participate in the markets is profitable. So I'll just leave it at that. The only reference I had to that was you may have followed that in California. They recently revamped the S-chip incentive mechanism. It is indeed a step-down approach to incentives with a clear timeline. It's separate for large commercial versus small systems. That's one approach. I'm not advocating for a particular number, but that's one approach to deal with it. So leave it at that.
Thanks, Carlos. I'm just making this a little easier for the presenters. Okay. Do you want to steer or do you want me to steer?
How about now? Turning it on helps. My name is Jin. Good afternoon. I am Senior Engineer in Distribution Engineering at Con Edison. And for the past 3 years, I have been deeply involved, as Doug knows, and probably most of you in the room, in all of our battery storage projects, especially in the application of load shifting. Today, I'm just going to give you a brief overview, and I think a lot of the speakers today already have covered most of the topic in the first half of that agenda. And then I'll talk to you a little bit about benefits of customer, Con Edison, New York State, and touch on projects that we are working on in REV and some of the incentive programs that we have launched in the past for battery storage systems. And then I will close with just a little bit on the collaboration project that we have with the FDMI and DOB in addressing some of that permitting challenges. So I think I'm just going to go through my first few slides very quickly. You guys have heard this over and over again. So the only thing I want to point out in this slide is that curve on the bottom. That's actually a typical curve of our large commercial customer. So one way, and you've been hearing customer can save money and reduce their peak demand charge. That's how they can do that. At night, you can see that there is a huge trough when energy is cheaper, so you can charge your battery and actually reduce that. So the blue line is what the customer would have been using, and the red line is what you can do in reducing that cost with the battery storage. For Con Edison, battery storage can help defer transmission and distribution costs, and I can give you some examples later on in my presentation. And for REV, we are exploring how we can find new sources of revenue. And I think most of you also have heard of our virtual power plants project, where we are partnered with SunVerge and SunPower, and you'll hear from one of the speakers later, to install. We're going to try to install a few hundred systems that are solar battery combined with a total capacity of 1.8 megawatts and 4 megawatt hour. And the main goal in this demo project is to trying to see, do we have a space in Con Edison to play in the energy market? Can we produce additional revenues where we can provide additional reliability to the customers without increasing their bill? And also, is there a space for third market players? And this is, hopefully, the answers will be yes at the end of these demos. And then the other one, and I think this was referenced earlier also, we issued an RFI for batteries, or not battery, but storage systems in general. And I think the gentleman mentioned earlier that when we talk about energy storage, it shouldn't just be battery storage. And we have been trying to cast a wide net and asking providers to give us good ideas on what do you think can motivate the market? How can we utilize energy storage to not just provide additional revenue for third party, saving money for the customer, and also increasing our reliability? And we had a very strong response, 47 responses, and of those, we will be selecting ones that make the most economic and feasible sense in the short term. And Con Edison and O&R plans to file for demo projects in the third quarter of this year. And I'm not really going to dwell on this because I think the speakers this morning really touch on the benefit and how energy storage can benefit the state and how it can contribute to the state energy plan for renewables. But just to reiterate, the goal here is we want to enhance customer engagement. And I think you'll see later on in the programs that I'll be talking about, this energy storage movement, I should say, I don't know what's a good term for it, has really engaged our customers and really challenged them to start taking more proactive stances and not just being a passive user. Now they can control their bill and they can start thinking about, I'm just not turning on equipment and just getting charged for it, right? So now they can be a little smart about when to turn things on and how they can make money and save money. Demand management, so now I'm going to go into our program. Again, I hope all of you, if not most of you, have seen this program. Demand management program was the first of its kind for Con Edison, where we were trying to address a specific net system need, and we were trying to reduce or get customers to reduce their use during the time that is coincident to our system peak, which we define as 2 to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, June 1st through September 30th. As you can see here, we provide a very generous incentive for $2,100 a kW for battery storage systems. And the reason for that large incentive is because we were trying to reduce a large megawatt goal in a very aggressive timeline. And this program in itself is sort of a pilot. We had really just we had to design something where we can get large reductions per project, and we just see where the market took it, and we had a really great response for energy storage. We had 21 battery storage project applications totaling up to 18 megawatts, and that is all customer-sited solutions, a combination of outdoor and indoor. This program, demand management program, all of the funds have been committed, and so we're deciding part of that RFI is where do we put storage and how can we encourage it beyond DMP. Brooklyn Queens is another unique program. So DMP, we were addressing a system peak. DMP, so BQDM, we're trying to defer capital costs, right? You can see in that chart there, the red is where the capability of the area stations are for 3 networks in Brooklyn and Queens. And the projections are various scenarios of where we think we would be in terms of load growth. So the option is when your demand is higher than your capability, historically we build a new station, right? But that's costly and it adds to our ratepayers in their bill. So we were challenged to be creative and say, okay, what can you do to try to avoid a new station? And how can you reduce not just at the customer site, but also what kind of creative solutions can you apply from the utility side? So we were given $150 million to solve that demand, overflow, that increase in demand, and 11 megawatt of that is dedicated to utility side. Majority of that is working with our customers and see how we can reduce that demand in energy efficiency as well as load management. In the BQDM program, we had 18 customer-sided proposals for battery storage, and you can see the various chemistries that were proposed. And for the first time, we're installing a large battery at our unit substations. And I think Rick mentioned earlier that, he doesn't really see a need for or believe in greater than 4 hours. And in this case, we bought a battery for 12 megawatt hours. So you can either have 1 megawatt for 12 hours, or we have the flexibility of 2 megawatts for 6 hours. And energy storage is not the only solution we're applying in the utility. We're trying a bunch of different solutions on what's most effective, and what ends up being most cost effective is what we will deploy in future network needs. And lastly, I'm just going to touch a little bit on our permitting collaboration with the FDMI. When we first launched the MP, we recognized that the code currently does not address energy storage system for a daily cycling for peak demand management. So we approach FDMI and DOB and trying to, how can we alleviate that issue? Because we are expecting our customers to increase their use in energy storage system beyond the UPS, which is what we've been seeing in New York City. And based on our conversations with them, we were able to develop a testing plan that will ultimately provide a first responders guide and supporting material in setting new code requirements for ventilation systems. And this project will be co-funded between NYSERDA and Con Edison. That's it.
Thank you, Jinjin. So next up, we have Cameron Brooks. Could you pass the mouse to him? And I will queue up the, if it's possible. Oh, I can't do it from here. Shoot. I'm sorry.
Great. Well, thanks very much, and it's a pleasure to be here and be up on the panel. I'm here working with SunVerge, which is, I'll walk through a couple slides of who SunVerge is, and maybe then share some thoughts about our perspective on treatment of storage, especially in regard to RECs, which I know is one of the questions that's come up. So SunVerge was founded in 2009. It's a San Francisco-based company. It's raised a fair amount of capital over the last few years and grown to a staff of over 50. The first devices went in California, but there are other projects around the country, including in Hawaii, Nevada, Kentucky, and overseas in New Zealand, Australia, South Korea, and Germany. And as Jinjin mentioned, soon to be here in New York State. So part of the vision is to be able to interface at the customer level, at the premise level for residential customers, and be able to provide a lot of those benefits you've heard about already and that are mentioned in some of the projects here in New York around resiliency and reliability for customers, the ability to do time shifting and deal with rate arbitrage, but then also to be able to network that those resources and be able to provide a variety of different grid level services. So, one of the things that I know others have touched on, but there's really value at all scales with storage, which is one of the things that makes it unique from many other technologies. So there's value down at the residential scale up to, more megawatt class. And I think some of that is captured. So this, I suppose, will be my eye chart for the slides, since a lot of the slides here today have used really small fonts. This one has a few of those details as well. But hopefully it gives an idea of how, at the customer level, you can maximize solar. You have some built-in intelligence around demand and energy prices, and then an ability to participate in grid services. And on the grid side, many of the sort of benefits that we've talked about are at play. So just in terms of the overall fleet, there's a few statistics about where SunVerge is right now in terms of its development. So I know these slides will be available. I'm not really going to spend much time on this. And I also won't spend a lot of time on this slide touching on the variety of different services or value streams that are available. I think a lot of these have been touched on in earlier presentations, and we'll get to talk about them more. I guess the one thing I would say about this is that probably each of these different services has behind it, perhaps, or available to it, a different kind of mechanism in order to either participate in a market or be compensated. And so I think you've heard from speakers today, there might be a variety of approaches that New York State looks at in order to think about how should we incentivize storage and solar, and solar as well. As Jinjin mentioned, SunVerge is a partner in the upcoming Clean Virtual Power Plant, and she's already touched on that a little bit, but at least we had a picture of a building. So, with some idea of who SunVerge is, I wanted to spend a minute or two talking about how does this apply in New York State. And I know that in the staff memo there's a lot of questions about what should be the right kind of incentive. Now, far be it from me to walk in and say that we have an answer, because we clearly don't. But I think we know some of the questions that I think are worth asking and to consider. And, there's probably two things that we can affirmatively say. And the first would be that, yes, storage should be included in the incentive scheme. It's clearly part of the value stack of the technologies that provide resiliency, that enhance renewable energy, that deal with things like intermittency. And so it's part of the chain. For the benefit of those who might not be able to see me, I've got a sling on from some recent surgery, so I've got connective tissue on the brain. Maybe Sarah does too. And it just strikes me that we can have, if there's an analogy here, we can have a muscle, in my case a bicep muscle, that maybe can get stronger, but if there's no connection to the actual infrastructure, then it really doesn't do any good. Now, hopefully they've repaired that, in my case, enough so that I can start to build that up again. But, to take the analogy one step further, there are different nutrients and different kinds of exercises that you might do to deal with the muscle versus the connective tissue. And I think the same applies here. So, so that the second piece of the affirmative things that I think we can say is that, yes, somehow there should be incentives that go to solar. Now, right now, renewable energy credits are sort of the coin of the realm, and it's something that we have here available. And so the question becomes, well, should storage be eligible, or should RECs be used? To the degree that that's the only coin available, then I think the answer is yes. But I think probably the answer would be we might want to think about whether there are other coins that we want to introduce into the system. So I know, for example, that the idea of a flexible energy credit has come up, and that certainly resonates with me, and I think is something that's worth exploring a bit more. But there's a few other options that have been put forward, and whether it's maybe a multiplier on RECs, or perhaps there would be some kind of way to enhance a capacity value, because clearly storage does have a multiplier effect there. So, I guess I would just say, speaking broadly, or maybe stepping back a little bit, the idea of a renewable energy credit, it's really established probably at the beginning of the century, or 15 or so years ago, as a means towards an end of how to enhance renewable energy. And so it was probably pretty aptly named at that time, but maybe now we need to think about how we either expand the scope of what renewable energy is, or what the benefits look like, or, as I say, think about other kinds of mechanisms, whether it's a flexible energy credit or some kind of multiplier that really allows for storage to be recognized for the value that it's providing. I think that's probably about it in terms of just trying to set up a few of the questions. I guess the last thing that I would highlight that hopefully, it supports this idea is that looking through the Track 2 order, clearly this conversation that we're having here, while it's in the context of a specific proceeding, that proceeding is within the context of a much larger proceeding, or much larger initiative, I would say. And if you look at the Track 2 order, it's pretty clear that they want to figure out, the Commission wants to figure out, how can utilities be able to benefit from and be rewarded for decreasing costs of the clean energy standard compliance and increasing the capacity of clean energy. And so, some things like RECs might be might have mechanisms available to them that will probably flow directly to either project developers or to the consumer. But then there's also a piece around grid services and the ability to build out that infrastructure, that connective tissue, if you will, that are clearly worth exploring too. So my guess is that there isn't one answer to the questions that are being posed or the question that's being posed here, but hopefully, a few different areas where we might want to explore more. And so I just look forward to being part of that conversation and the rest of the conversation today.
Thank you, Cameron. So next up, we have Mike Jackson from Advanced Microgrid Solutions, and I'll bring up your slides right now.
Thank you. While we're waiting for the slides, I just want to thank the organizers, Matt particularly, for all the work that he's doing today, and the others that were involved, and we're really pleased to be part of this. My name is Mike Jackson. I'm part of Advanced Microgrid Solutions, and I'm based in the Northeast in Boston. I'm responsible for developing markets in the Northeast. Thanks. So I have a nice picture of New York, and hopefully the font will work out for you guys. We really appreciate your time, and so I'm not going to spend much time on this wheel, which you've already seen, thanks to Carlos. I will say that what I'm focused on and what I want to bring to the fore here is the business model innovation that has to happen in order to make this happen at scale. So we have three different types of customers represented on this wheel. We have the utility customer, and we have the grid, the ISO, and we have the C&I customers. And the next project I'm going to talk about has value components for each one of those customers, and that's the basis of the business model that has to be built and rolled out hundreds of times in an aggregated behind-the-meter storage solution. So it starts with a developer. Could be AMS. It could be any other developer that's out there that wants to build, own, and operate for long-term battery assets behind the meter. In this particular case, the utility or DSP services that we're providing are related to resource adequacy in an area of congestion. And there's a bilateral contract where we're providing specific services back, DSP services back to the utility, and they're providing us with a long-dated financeable contract. One of those methods that Cameron just mentioned is in the Track 2 proceeding. So that's the first part. That allows us to develop the batteries for a long duration contract with our host customer. The second part is the host customer. We focus on large batteries behind large loads, commercial and industrial loads that typically are in the 500 kW to multi-megawatt loads, and correspondingly large batteries behind them. The way that we structure that is with a shared savings agreement with the customer. So the customer and AMS have aligned interests, and we share savings equitably during the life of the contract. That's really our upside. And then the third customer is the ISO and the RTO, in enabling these multiple value streams to be stacked and include ISO participation with guys like Mike in the back is a really important part of the long-term growth for storage, and I think we all know that. So I'm going to give some big pictures to you now so you don't have to squint at the fine print. This is a capacity constrained area just around LA. It's you can see the airport, John Wayne Airport there. What we're focused on is basically the targeted substations across that area and identifying where we can put behind the meter storage in order to create essentially a non-wires alternative with a financeable contract. We need that financeable contract because it takes a lot of work to go out and recruit those customers. And what I'm going to talk about here, again, picking up on what Jinjin said earlier, is customer engagement and how critical that is on the C&I side and on the residential side. Our focus is developing large clusters of behind-the-meter storage, which then we can aggregate into a utility grids solution that's got what I call the storageables, the flexible and the configurable and the adaptable, with the emphasis on flexible because we're talking about flex, FLECs, flex like Rex, but flexible. Very important for us to be able to aggregate these resources. Many of them may be below a megawatt, which is an issue, obviously, that we hit here in NYSO. So what we're trying to do is be able to set up a extraordinarily easy and fast, in the context of everything that we do in the utility and energy world, customer engagement process. So our typical offer out to the customer is demand charge reduction and other levels of bill savings related primarily to time of use, rate arbitrage and things of that nature. It's a significantly compelling opportunity, and the customer is having to consider putting batteries on their site for a period of 10 plus years. In order to accelerate the process, we have to work very quickly around a compelling value proposition with folks that don't have a lot of time to spend on it. So there's a lot of performance risk in the kind of contract that we're talking about here. You have the financial or merchant risk associated with building the batteries, and that's where that can be apportioned back in part to the utilities. The developers taking technology risk because we've got a performance contract with the customer and with the utility. And I think that the customer engagement risk, which is the risk to deployment, just like you have with an energy efficiency customer management process that has to consider how are we going to engage new customers across the board in a rapid way that allows us to expand energy efficiency as a resource. We have a significant risk with the customer engagement, and that's why the financeable contract is so important, so we can bring a compelling offer. It works. We're proving this now every day. You've heard it from Doug. You've heard it from Carlos, and Sunverge is doing it. A lot of companies are out there doing this now. One customer in this case liked the idea of hybrid electric branding for the buildings. They offered 26 commercial office buildings with a total of about 10 megawatts, just one customer, all behind the meter, zero emissions, no distribution upgrades for the customer. So it's important to understand the business model, and it's also important to understand that a big part of this business model is the software platform that drives it. All those storageables that I mentioned, the adaptable, configurable, and flexible, all happen because of software platforms that the utility and the developer and owner-operator need to collaborate on to develop the value of storage across all the different stackable value levels. In this case, what we're looking at is some peak shaving that's happening, but a utility called event in the afternoon related to resource adequacy. All of the opportunities that you have around using the software to co-optimize and configure the batteries are really essential for the batteries' long-term value and increasing value as there are changes in the environment. So we were here today to talk a little bit about how storage fits into the clean energy standard, so I have to have the obligatory slide that shows the duck curve. In this case, it's a little bit different than what we've been seeing so far. This is one commercial industrial customer that has, we're representing their days. They're all the weekdays in October 2015. And you can see the higher curve is where the customer would have been without the solar. The lower curve is with the solar. And then the new peak that's formed. And the effect of batteries in combining batteries with solar is undeniable. And this is a great illustration for one customer. If you do that across hundreds of customers, it becomes meaningful. So let me wrap up in conclusion with some ideas, many of which have already been mentioned here, around animating the New York State storage market. We're working hard, and we're involved in a lot of the proceedings around identification of full locational value, but for behind-the-meter storage, that's clearly what's going to drive the difference and make a lot of these deals pencil. The financeable revenue stream or streams for development could be flex, it could be capacity contracts like the one I referred to earlier. The key is that they're long-term and they're predictable. Being able to support the batteries, which are flexible. Deploy the storage across the key parts of the infrastructure first to maximize the hosting capacity for renewables, and that aligns directly with the 50 by 30 guidelines, and leveraging behind-the-meter storage for customer engagement, as I mentioned earlier, is essential to how the whole innovative business model holds together. We need to be able to value the flexibility of storage distributed energy resources, and in the case of grid support, be able to open up NISO to aggregated behind-the-meter resources that may be less than a megawatt per site. Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it. Matt, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Can I borrow that from you? Excellent.
Okay, so we'll round out the panel with a presentation from Sarah Van Cleve from Tesla Energy.
Great, and while Matt's pulling that up, I'll get started with introduction. So I'm Sarah Van Cleve. I manage Tesla's energy storage policy. So I'm bringing the technology provider perspective, but also until about a year ago, I was at Southern California Edison when we were implementing the storage procurement target. So hopefully I can share some lessons learned from the utility side as well. So first I'm going to run you guys through a few fun pictures of projects that are actually out there getting deployed, and then hit on sort of how this fits into REV on a larger scale. So first, I think you all know Tesla because of its cars. We do have over 8 gigawatt hours of storage deployed. Most of it has wheels on it, but we have a whole lot that doesn't as well. Last year, you probably heard the big announcement about Tesla Energy. In reality, we've been working on stationary storage for about 6 years. But now is the time where we're really going worldwide with that. And you probably know about the Powerwall product. That's the home product on the left there. But certainly for a lot of these utility scale applications, we are looking at the Power Pack, which is our other larger product. It comes in 100 kilowatt hour blocks, but that can be stacked up to hundreds of megawatt hours, even gigawatt hours. So that's what a lot of our projects are here in North America. All right, so here's some pictures of residential installations. You've heard a lot about what residential storage can do for customers, but I want to focus on some sort of utility applications. And a good example is Green Mountain Power. So right now they have a program where they're putting 500 Powerwalls in customers' homes. And they're essentially splitting the costs with the customers, because the customer gets the value of the backup power, they can self-consume their solar, but the utility is also controlling those devices on similar in one of its demonstration projects. Here's an image of a commercial building installation out in California. This particular project is 2 megawatts, 4 megawatt hours, so a 2-hour resource, doing all the things that my colleagues have mentioned. We do have about 40 of these projects in California, and what's, I think, different and adds on to what they said, not only is it for customer demand management, time of use rate, backup, but also these projects are bidding into demand response programs, and some of them are being aggregated up into the types of contracts that AMS and others are working on. So certainly a lot of applications for these larger commercial scale building installations. And then finally, this is a rendering of the utility scale project that Carlos hit on, so the Kauai project. We're happy to be providing the batteries for that project, 52 megawatt hours. And I know it's easy for folks to say, oh, that's Hawaii, they have super high energy prices, it might be economical there, but it's not here. But it's just really not the case. So you look at the price of this contract, it's 14.5 cents per kilowatt hour, so $145 a megawatt hour. If you look at the levelized cost of energy of gas peakers, I looked at a Lazard study last night, it's between $179 per megawatt hour to $230 per megawatt hour. So these projects are economical here on the mainland as well. All right, and so on to, I guess, my Edison experience. I was at Edison both when we had the 1.3 gigawatt target for the state. Edison's portion was 580 megawatts, but within that, in this particular solicitation that started in 2013 called the LCR RFO, which stands for Local Capacity Requirements RFO, in which the utility was looking to buy 2,000 megawatts of capacity because the nuclear plant went offline, the once-through cooling units, the old gas-fired plants were going offline, and needed a lot of capacity. And so the California Public Utility Commission said, in this particular solicitation, at least 50 megawatts of that has to be storage. You should also look at demand response and energy efficiency and gas peakers. Look at all of it, but at least 50 has to be storage. As it turned out, Edison ended up buying 261 megawatts of storage. That's because we went through the process of actually, putting storage into every bid offer form, really going and contemplating how storage was going to play out at every part of the grid. And so these are the results. I know the font is kind of small here, but to give you an idea of what we picked up in that solicitation, it was 26 megawatts of behind-the-meter thermal storage, which had been referred to earlier, so that's the HVAC type of storage. 100 megawatts that my colleague at AES mentioned earlier, so that's in front of the meter, grid-scale lithium-ion batteries, and then 135 megawatts of behind-the-meter lithium-ion batteries. So that's a lot of those commercial building deployments that can be aggregated to provide capacity that the utility can really utilize. So this was just, such a great lesson learned from the utility perspective of, when we really did the hard thinking of how do we include storage in this valuation. It was really the first time that storage was valued against all different types of resources for capacity, and it was an economical proposal, even when this solicitation happened a few years ago. And obviously everyone's been talking about how much prices are coming down and are continue to come down. So how does this fit into REV and the Clean Energy Standard? REV is all about making a systematic change for clean, affordable, and resilient power. I don't think there's anything that embodies that more than storage. Obviously, we've heard a lot about the clean component of storage, how it helps integrate renewables, how it improves the system efficiency. I thought that Doug did a great job of talking about reduction in line losses, as well as having generators run more efficiently if you have storage on the system. And that plays into affordability. Obviously, we've heard of a lot of examples where storage really is the economical choice for the customer, regardless of renewables, regardless of anything else. And then finally, obviously, resiliency. The more distributed grid you have, and the more resilient grid that you're having, and we see that in a lot of the microgrid projects being deployed through New York Best. And I do want to point out that the DPS did say that storage should be included in system planning as part of its DSIP guidance. I think last fall it was. And so I think that the DPS has acknowledged that storage needs to be incorporated into all of the typical processes, but I don't think that we've really gotten there quite yet. And so this next slide, I want to hit on what are the barriers to storage. There are a lot of other barriers, including financeability, et cetera, but I think at its core, the issue is that storage is not included in every utility process. Right now, there are great demonstration projects going on, but when you put together a demonstration project, you have your R&D team going out there looking at one project. You don't have every group in your company looking at it. What we really need is every guy in the procurement group who's writing RFPs and making bid offer forms to be considering, how do I put storage in here? We need the guy in the operations room at the middle of the night knowing how he's going to use storage. We need every distribution planner to think when they're proposing a new solution, is storage the right option here? And I think you really get that from a storage procurement target. And that's what we saw in California, was when I was at Edison, all of a sudden we were like, oh wow, this is real. We really have to get into the weeds, do this hard thinking, and develop new processes essentially that contemplate energy storage. So for that reason, and basically in order to get to that place where storage is incorporated in every process, a storage procurement target puts you in the right direction. You shouldn't have a storage procurement target forever. Eventually, you really should be technology agnostic and just use the technology that fits the needs of the systems. But to get over this hump of storage being such a different resource, not being incorporated in our processes right now, that's what a storage procurement target is really useful for. And I will point to the fact that there can be cost-effectiveness provisions built in. We're very confident that storage is a cost-effective resource, but I know there are a lot of concerns of, we don't want to jump the gun and buy a lot when it's not cost-effective. Well, California had a cost-effectiveness provision in its target, and 2.5 years later and 500 megawatts procured, no utility has said that we're not buying or deferring our targets because of cost-effectiveness. So hopefully that gives folks some comfort that we really can buy good projects. We just need to set our mind to it and develop this systematic change within the utilities and the general energy planning process to incorporate energy storage. So I guess to round it out, I heard 4 things. I wanted to have 3, but I couldn't leave out the 4th, that I heard from a lot of my colleagues today about how do we push the energy storage market. First, I think the message was loud and clear that storage is here and economical. I think that's really important for everyone to understand, because there's been too much talk the last few years of, oh, it's just too expensive now. Certainly prices will keep coming down, but the price is already down enough to be buying it now. Secondly, I thought a few people had a good point about long-term certainty in contracts. You're not going to build a storage project, a pretty substantial capital investment, with a 1 to 3 year capacity price guarantee. You really need some longer-term contracts in order to get those projects developed. The third point there is co-location with renewables. There's absolutely benefits to co-locating with renewables in some places, but that is not necessary in order to still have storage that supports renewables. Just especially in load-dense areas, you can have a more effective resource that is both incorporating system-level renewables while also providing other values that are more local. And finally, I think that pretty much everyone up here said that we really need a substantial storage procurement target. And some folks have talked about that with the idea of a flexible energy credit, but essentially that's the same thing, right? You're setting a goal of energy storage. We need to sort of have a mission as a state to go by that. And so we should have a discussion about what exactly is the right mechanism. I personally, having been through California's mandates, I think that was quite a good process. But regardless of how it shapes out, I really think that a storage target for the state is the right way to go. So with that, I guess I'll turn it back over to Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so let's finish off the day with a final question and answer session. If audience members want to queue up to the podium while they're doing that. Actually, and also Rick, after you ask your question, would you mind maybe coming up here in case anyone had other questions for you? I know there was a few more and we kind of cut them off early.
Okay.
Thanks. Go ahead, Rick.
Thank you, Rick Fioravanti. And Sarah, I really appreciate the way you ended this, because I think it was really rounded out how we started this. But that is my question for the entire panel. What should we focus on first? I mean, because we talked about doing analysis to create that no regrets number. We talked about trying to find ways to remove barriers, unleashing Jinjin to give her more opportunity to incorporate storage, or just getting a slug of cash and providing incentives. What would you recommend New York do first and foremost to move this forward and accelerate the deployment of storage?
I'll start, but I would say it's really economic certainty, right? What's the business case? What's the model? How are we going to shape that? Is it in the form of incentives? Is it in the form of rate structure design? Is it, a blend of the two? That's, I think, what's holding everything back right now. We don't have the financial structure, be it for the value added or the market structure that we think is going to evolve out of REV.
I'll accept that point. But then I hear Sarah and others talking about the cost effectiveness today of storage. So how do we reconcile? Is it segmented? Is it certain applications where there's a cost effective application and others where there may well be a need for some incentives?
Yeah. Go for it.
Okay. That's an excellent question, and I think I can point you back to the presentation that I did, and that there's incentives that crosses these 3 stakeholder groups. And there's benefit that crosses the 3 stakeholder groups. Get ahead of my thought. And there's risk associated with each one of those stakeholder groups. And I think they both should be allocated fairly and equitably. And so I think that it's cost effective right now without some of these benefits. It's going to be, to get it done at large scale, every benefiting group needs to probably contribute to the solution. And so I think I'd start with opportunities for utilities to be able to benefit from storage in a market-based earnings way.
I don't want to take the time now, but I'd be interested to know what that would look like.
Sure. I mean, I guess to add to that, there are cost-effective uses, but it's a matter of being able to capture all the value streams that are there. So if you put in a storage project at a customer site, yes, it reduces their demand charge, helps them time of use rate shift. However, unless there's a utility signal saying, look, there's also this utility value to having that storage dispatch at these certain times, it's sort of having those opportunities to combine the values is really what we need.
And I think that in New York, there are a number of initiatives that are looking at those different opportunities to create value that, from a policy point of view, would stack the value. One of the things we're hoping for, and which Con Ed is one, is that the utilities use the demonstration projects as an opportunity to demonstrate how those values could be brought together. So there may be some other utilities who are listening who will think of some opportunities. But the possibilities, if not infinite, are varied, right? And it becomes 3- and 4-dimensional. So without promising success, it's very helpful if the industry comes along and says, here's what we need. And if it's to combine the value streams in a way that becomes financeable and bankable, that's fine. So I take all the message. I get it. We get it. Storage is important. Storage is valuable. Storage needs a market design to have it flourish. Left to my own devices, I can design one thing. Raj can design something else. We could put it out for comment. But you all live with this every day. And when I was on your side of the table, I used to look for opportunities to say, if you will do the following, I can produce the following. So with no guarantees, I want to invite you to answer that question.
So to add a little bit more color to that question and to what Sarah has mentioned, probably I would say that the approach is going to be different by segment. And so maybe just relating to how the California procurement targets were filled out, I would suggest that, so first of all, there were 3 categories. There was transmission-connected storage, distribution-connected, and customer-sided. The distribution-connected and transmission-connected is a competitive solicitation open to these cost-effectiveness measures. And we found great opportunities there. From the customer-sided targets, what maybe you don't see together is that the role that SGIP did play into that. So for commercial-sided and some of the residential, the SGIP did play a role. So I'll just offer that as one perspective, how things played out in California. And the other thing that's super important is what Sarah mentioned, that some of the things that did trigger that cost effectiveness too is the actual needs that was experienced in Southern California as well. That really gives you some clarity about what you're really shooting at, and that allows you to get to that cost effectiveness threshold. So that having that visibility from the utility and a transparency about what is needed will get us there.
So if I can, I wanted to maybe take a moment to answer your question. Sorry? Am I not close enough? To answer your question as well as answer the question before, for at least off the couple. And if I understand your question right,
it's not turned on. Is your green light?
Green light. Now it's back. Everyone can hear me. If I understand the way you framed the question, it was how do we reconcile the idea that we need to deal with cost effectiveness and that it's cost effective, which I consider to be the value, versus the fact that you all seem to be moaning about the idea that you can't get financeable contracts, which is finance. They're not necessarily the same thing, so I'm not sure that there's a reconciliation that needs to happen. I mean, to me, I heard the question as, if this is so great, then how come it's not just happening on its own? And this is a challenge that has faced renewables and other kinds of new technologies over and over again. So I guess I bristle at the idea that that's something that needs to be reconciled as much as it's something that needs to be identified and addressed.
Fair enough. So I'll take your point, and I'll change the word to clarify, because I think that, in a public policy discussion, people will cleave towards one of those two extremes, and that was not my intent.
Yeah.
My intent was to get greater clarity on what's missing. And I think, as Carlos pointed out, what's missing may vary by segment. And of particular interest right now is how can the CES, and now not the 50 by 30 goal, but the CES itself and the mechanisms that's going to produce RECs and is going to provide monetization of those values. What role does storage have? Now, whatever the answer is, there are at least a dozen other opportunities that have been identified today throughout the state to identify and monetize that value and bring that value into the New York system. But by asking about the CES, and as I mentioned, some people said, well, why don't you have a tier for storage? Same way you have a tier for Class 1 renewables. Some other people said, well, how about bonus RECs? All those ideas are legitimate, but they all come with other implementation problems. For example, if a REC represents 1 megawatt hour of generation, then all of a sudden the REC doesn't represent that anymore. Now, it may be that there are other incentives that are needed in order to allow storage to provide its value to the New York system as a whole and help the state achieve its renewable goals and all the other goals that are embedded in REV. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a REC or a bonus REC. And I really wanted to take a minute to explore that, again, without wanting to say it's one or the other. It's not binary.
Well, and I think that goes back to the question that was originally posed, which is what would we propose that you do? And bringing it back to the context of this technical workshop, which is within the CES proceeding, which is presumably moving towards some kind of action, originally stated in June. I don't know if it's still on that timeline. I can see at least two things that might be done within the context of this proceeding. And the first would be to do some kind of assessment to say, what is if all of us have essentially said, which I think we have, storage enhances the carrying capacity of the grid to take more renewables on board. Well, that shouldn't be a particularly difficult number to at least provide some bands around. How much extra capacity can be put on the grid if storage is put in place? In the morning we heard that 2 gigawatts would be able to shave off a third of the peak hours of those top 100 hours. If I did the numbers right, I mean that's $400 to $500 million of value right there, and it shouldn't be that hard to come up with a similar assessment of how many more extra megawatts can we put on the grid at the bulk level, at the distribution level, at the residential level. And so I would propose that one thing that could happen within this proceeding is to come up with that kind of potential. And the second thing that I would propose...
Just on that, can I just clarify for the benefit, that number has been bandied around a few times, the 100 hours, and those estimated savings are gross savings, not net savings. It'll take effort to...
Fair enough. It's still a very big number. But I take your point, and I'd say it's a number that overwhelms the cost. The value very clearly overwhelms the cost, because it wouldn't take $500 million to build that amount of storage and put it into the system, not from the estimates that I've seen. And so the second thing that I was going to say that could happen within this proceeding is, if not to define a tier or a specific instrument, at least to define a process, whether it's, the staff, I think, would need to make the determination of what can go into the next order to come out in this proceeding. But presumably that could at least identify, we're encouraging the commission, or we are establishing a process by which we're going to start to explore these things and determine whether I fully recognize that a REC, if it suddenly becomes something else, maybe doesn't become fungible across state lines, and that would certainly be a detriment to the market. So maybe that's not the avenue. Maybe a tier is not the avenue. But there must be some creative solutions, and if they can't be done within this proceeding, then at least it can define what the pathway is to start that conversation. So those are the two things that I would say is, what's the potential and what's the pathway?
I have to apologize. I have to step out to take a call that came up. So I want to say thank you to all of you. This has been very informative and very helpful, and who knows, maybe you'll see something in the order.
And I just want to quickly add to address that question. For us, we're trying more demo projects, and I think one of the speakers mentioned earlier that I think it was Green Charge, that behind the meter ownership seems to be a good model and should be a leading model. But we think that we should not take ownership by the utility off the table, because we need to look at all revenue sources and how we can have these reliability assets and maintaining the cost down for customers.
That's certainly a theme of this season.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, we can finish up, and I appreciate that. One of the statements I was going to make when we start looking at how to get to this target number, I think cost effectiveness has been done. I did it with, for the California study. My colleague in this room, Sadita Lahiri, did it for the California study. So I understand the point of we may want to take it to the next level, dive a little bit further into the details to get more, not just cost effectiveness, but what is it really going to take to get it done in New York, and leverage what has been done in California as opposed to try to replicate it. So I appreciate, how we get there. I think we do need to get to that target number. How we do that is something I think it's going to be left up to the folks in this room to help form. So next question, I guess, or does it mean we're wrapping up?
Yeah, no, that's fine. If people are into it, we can keep rolling. That's fine. Next question.
Thank you very much. My name is Josh Rogel from Vision Energy Storage. And with an eye towards rate design and tariff structures, an important leg of the stool seems to be the inclusion of a renewable resource, so whether that be PV or other, and the qualification for the 30% federal investment tax credit. That limits how you charge and discharge the battery and what electrons come from where. So I just wonder if the panel has given some thought towards a set of recommendations that includes how we're interacting with renewables, specifically towards leveraging that 30% tax credit, because it is important to offset some of the CapEx.
Well, in our modeling, we just look at qualification as far as where the IRS is today, that you got to have at least 75% of that energy is stored from renewables. And that's easy to do, easy to track, easy to maintain. But, the hope is that eventually storage will qualify for ITC benefit as well, just storage alone. It should. I mean, remember, this is an early market. We're in early adoption periods, so it needs help, just like other technologies, to get people comfortable, to ensure financiers that the structure is there. We don't have the market metrics quite right. When you look at the wholesale market, there's costs for the supply, there's cost for congestion, there's cost for line losses. That's the way the market's reconciled today. I think eventually we get there in a mode where, if you think about the distribution system platform provider being the market settlement operation here within the distribution system, and the way that we start to build value around load and load shaping and load management within the distribution grid, there's a market that evolves out of that. But that's a lot of work to get that moving forward.
This is Rick. If I could just add to that, I think while the renewables part is great and it's extremely important, we shouldn't lose sight of some of the stuff that Doug pointed out earlier, which is if I'm displacing an old peaker that was running for a couple hours at a very low part load, the emissions and the fuel burn and the heat rate from that were pretty poor compared to if I was charging a battery, with a combined cycle running, near its optimum point. So it's not just the renewables integration where you're going to get a big emissions benefit from energy storage.
I was just going to add in response to the previous question. So we do follow the same. There's a minimum threshold that you have to charge a battery from solar to meet to the ITC. I think there's probably room for clarification on setups where you are part charging from the grid. What's going to be the treatment in New York, and particularly for NEM eligibility of those resources. I think that there's some clarification that could help us as well.
Just wanted to be a little bit more granular in the value streams that all of you spoke about, different buckets of value stream, capacity, peak reduction, or valley filling, or energy arbitrage values, or providing other ancillary services, or other value streams. Given that there are different ones, is there one we should start with in focusing and putting our attention on getting the tariffs right or pricing right, or should we attack all of these streams at the same time? Which one of those four, or does it matter, or does it differ depending on the application?
Well, I'll take a stab at it. I think, first of all, we ought to look at some of the low-hanging fruit, right? And so one of the challenges that we see, that we've looked at from a distribution system optimization, is if you really look at Con Ed service territory here, right where we're at down here, peak down here is from 11 o'clock to 3 o'clock, right? So the building that's 2 blocks over that has a 100 kW storage system operating is going to shave a peak today in that building at 10 a.m. outside of that window. So from the building's perspective, we're going to drive savings today for that reduction, right? We're going to add very little value to Con Ed and the distribution system because today it's from 11 to 3 here. When we look in other areas, and there's basically downtown's 11 to 3, some of the midtown stuff is as well, mainly core commercial areas. When you start to get into a blended mix, it's basically 2 to 6, 4 to 8, and then when you get out to the residential areas, it's 7 to 11. So one of our arguments has been, when you look at the way demand structures were based, and that's our key metric for earning right now for behind the meter storage, and you look at the way the demand rates are built, I like to say they're analog rates living in a digital world. And we have the argument for building an hourly rate that prices demand at hourly capacity level that adds value to the distribution system so that every day we're incented to reduce loading in these districts that are pretty common about having a peak loading period day in, day out. Some areas where you have electric heat may be a little distorted in the area, but try to tie the value of load reduction for the distribution company and do that through price signals. And that's why we've come up with the concept of hourly pricing for capacity. We do that on supply today. All of our buildings, we put on a day-ahead index rate. We play the wholesale market. We buy off peak. We time shift that energy, and we drive savings every day from that perspective. I think it's very similar to start there in just optimizing distribution system, and I'll start to provide some of that peaking relief in those distribution networks, which will help reduce just overall wear and tear of that area.
I'll add to that some color. I think that we have evolved quite a bit along the line of project, solicitations to address a particular project deferral. And my sense is that, those are going to be, very productive opportunities. I think where probably we need to do more is where you look at if resources are providing sort of like average system needs, but not necessarily deferring one single project, but do have benefits to the system in several ways. So let's say even reducing the thermal loading on the entire system. There may be opportunity with the help from the utilities to articulate where that makes sense, and that could be implemented through tariffs. But of course, we do need the institutional knowledge from the utilities to articulate where that would make sense. But that would get us from the stickiness of just relying on individual solicitations one at a time.
Okay. Well, I was going to add in a little bit to this. Because I agree with that, and if the question is, where should we start next? And again, this may be a little outside the scope of the Clean Energy Standard proceeding, but certainly within the REV proceeding, there's this concept of a smart home rate, which is somewhat undefined at this point, but presumably relates to a discrete premise. And I think one of the concepts that is being tested in the upcoming demonstration project, whether it's termed this or not, is essentially the idea of a network portfolio rate, which you suggest might be implemented through tariffs. And I think that's something that isn't really defined anywhere in the language of the proceedings right now. So how do you take what we've all discussed, this ability to coordinate these assets that sit out in the field, whether they're on the utility side of the meter or the customer side of the meter, and have them coordinate to provide these grid services. So developing some kind of pathway to understanding what those kinds of rates would be, I think would be a very fruitful place to go next.
I was going to add another question, and at the risk of breaking us up, because I know we're at 2:30, but Doug's needs are different from AES's needs, are different from Jinjin's needs, because one is on the customer side, one is on the distribution side, one is wholesale. And when you start talking about how to bucketize these, what to focus on, are they all separate? I mean, that's really my question is there something common to all of them that will benefit everybody that's advancing storage, or do you really have to look at this as a wholesale distribution and end use process and try to come up with something for each one of these groups in order to really make an impact?
And I'll take a stab at answering that a little bit. I think you do have to look at them separately in a total package. But there's one resounding thing that's critical, and New York is a competitive market state, and that's part of what we have to deal with also. It's a competitive market state. That's a reality that's different than California. And so the reality that all segments need is stable, predictable revenues. You have a capacity market in New York, but it's a 6-month market. It fell 35% this year between last summer and this summer. So while, yes, you can stack the wholesale revenue and the retail revenue and the ancillary revenue, they're not predictable revenues. So for the technology to move forward, whether it's behind the meter or in front of the meter, it's no different really than what the renewable developers are facing, which is some predictability over time, which was recognized in the original clean energy. I guess it was the LSR paper at that point. It was recognized, and that's the basic fundamental thing that applies to everybody. How you actually bring that most economically may need to be looked at between the in front of the meter, large scale, the behind the meter paired with solar versus the behind the meter standalone storage. There might be some nuances there, but the general common theme is that stable revenue in order for the projects to make economic sense to the developer.
And I'll answer for us. I mean, as a utility, we're technology agnostic, right? Our key focus is providing reliable system to our customers while minimizing any increase in cost. And the discussion today is on battery storage, and we do see benefits to this technology, especially when dealing with the increase in DERs, renewables, increase in extreme weather events and longer peak periods, and trying to defer cost and capital investment. Right now, storage just seems to be the best solution, but as far as technology goes, whatever comes up that provides us those happy medium, that's what we go with.
So I have a question from the internet here. Greg Pedrick of NYSERDA notes that a strong theme today is outdated load profiles and the need for better data to inform better modeling. He notes the difficulty in obtaining customer data with NDAs and the sensitivity around the customer's data, and then asks the question, should the utilities be mandated to obtain accurate, updated load profiles, and then notes that if the utilities don't do this, he sees a continuing void.
Well, I'll answer that because I think the challenge here in New York is there's where's Nick and Jinjin? There's 1,800 meters that are automated with profile data out of about, what's your total population? I think 3.3 million. So one of the challenges in New York is there's just not the information. Now, in California, where they've got AMI systems deployed in SCE, PGE, San Diego Gas and Electric, most of the municipals, the green button data, that works pretty good. But there just isn't really the available information that people are looking for. And that's a challenge. So you have to get kind of clever about how you go after the modeling effects of different buildings. Now, the good news is lots of buildings are very similar in shape. So you can scale appropriately and take a pretty good guess out of it. But that's one of the main issues behind trying to build business cases in the New York market.
Yeah, I would just pile on. I mean, there is a historic antipathy in the state to smart meters that I think has prevented that from being put out in the field. But I think that's changing. And certainly there are many other groups who've highlighted this same concern that he is around how do you actually get access to it. So I know Mission Data, for example, has been very active within the REV proceeding directly around exactly these questions. Customers should have access to their own information. It should be part of basic service. And I think the most recent order coming out has actually highlighted a lot of those. And so there's language in the most recent order in the REV proceeding to make sure that that information is available to customers, at least at a basic level. There's probably still a little bit of wiggle room that needs to get a bit more precise of exactly what that means. But hopefully that at least establishes a policy foundation to move forward with smart meter and other kinds of load profile information so that the policies are in place before the equipment goes in the field. From that point of view, New York may have an advantage over many other states that have primarily done it the other way. Let's put the meters out in the field and we'll figure out the policy environment later. And I think, you know, it's probably going to be more challenging in other states to get that kind of profile information because they didn't do it up front.
So I don't see, oh, did you want to add something?
I mean, only that, you know, we were just recently approved for AMI, and we will be deploying AMI in our service territory shortly. As far as how that data will be used or shared, that's something to be determined. But hopefully that will provide additional information for our customers and the market partners.
I mean, in Con Ed's defense, for the meters that they do have that data, the system that they have in place is very good. Their response time is wonderful. All you have to do is get authorization from the end user, and we'll get a file the next day. So what information is out there is available. You just need to get authorization.
All right, so if there's no other questions, oh, one more. Go ahead.
Hi, this is a question for Sarah.
Sure.
Suppose I'm a homeowner and I want to decide whether or not I should buy a power wall. And from my understanding, the power wall that you were talking about runs around $3,000. And then, of course, you're going to have to buy an inverter. So I don't know how much they cost, but they're not insignificant. Or I could go down to Home Depot, spend $949, and I'll buy $24 worth of gasoline. And instead of 7 kilowatt hours from the power wall, I'll get 42, 6 times more. And then I would look at the power wall and I'd ask myself, well, what would I use it for? Well, I would, as a homeowner, I guess I'm most concerned if there's some kind of a station blackout or blackout rather. And there are a variety of different loads, different that you get in a house. Some very small ones like your computers, which already has a battery in it. If you get into the medium loads, refrigerator around 1.5 kilowatt hours, clothes washer 2.3. These incidentally are your numbers, and the dryer 2.3. Oh, yeah. So if there was a blackout, I guess I should run out and do 2 washes and 1 dry, and I'm done. I can't do anything big like if I have space heating electrically, that won't do it. Power wall's too small. Or if it's in the heating season, it's far too small to do air conditioning. So I'm confused as to why I should put in all that money for a power wall when I can go to Home Depot and get a bigger capability.
So you might not go put a power wall, but I'll tell you why some customers are. First, you do get some value if you are on a time of use rate, can you hear me?
Could you speak up?
Sure. So in some states, there are residential time of use rates, so customers will arbitrage those time of use rates. Secondly, a lot of customers do want to self-consume their solar. There's not always the financial incentive and utility bills to do that, but some places there are. And then there is backup power. And of course, storage has a limited capacity. You can't run every load in your house indefinitely. So you hook the storage up to critical loads. And you don't run your dryer in a blackout. You have it on your freezer, your lights, maybe your internet and your TV. And third, in terms of the fact that the energy is finite, you can hook up the storage device with your solar. So if you're in a hurricane situation, your neighborhood's down for 4 days, you can constantly recharge your storage device with your solar if you need to do that in that scenario. So those are the reasons that we are seeing customers here in the U.S. deploy the Powerwalls at their homes.
And I'll add to that, my father in upstate New Hampshire did what you described. And during a blackout, he started up his system, and he had it in his 2-car garage inside, and within 15 minutes, the CO monitor went off in his house. He moved it outside into the driveway, and within 45 minutes, the CO monitor went off in his house. So space, and for some folks, they just don't have the ability to do that. They're in non-attainment with emissions. It may prevent it from happening, but Sarah's right. In some cases, solar storage combinations is the only thing which, absent a gas infrastructure, absent an electricity infrastructure, you can still maintain critical loads indefinitely. And so there are some advantages to it. It's just
For very small loads, you mean?
well, very small.
If
loads.
I'm in North Dakota and I have a station, if I have a blackout, I'm not really interested
Let me cut you
in
off.
running the refrigerator. I just have to open the door. So I think what I hear from that is, yes, there's a slice of applications where the Powerwall itself might be useful, but at the same time, I read in the literature where utilities are rushed out and ordered $1 billion worth of Powerwalls, and my head spins because I have no idea what they're going to do with it.
Herschel, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the comments. Okay, so let's adjourn. Thank you all very much for coming. I'd like to give a huge thank you to all of our panelists. This has been really great. It's really going to help us inform as we create the order for July for the Clean Energy Standard, move the ball forward a little bit. So thank you all. Does anyone have any closing remarks? Raj or anyone?
Thank you, Matt, for putting this together.
All right, take care, everyone. Thank you.